Chapter 21. Thus He-yong, Song Da-sheng and the other two became his guarantor. Since then, Gao Xiong had been looking forward to the arrival of the sixth young master every day. Not for anything else but to prove himself. Today she finally saw the sixth young master. She also obtained the Type 92 pistol that she wanted to touch but couldn't. How could she not cry and not run away? He patted Gao Xiong's shoulder and said, "Good job. In the future, the navy will be handed over to you." This wasn't to comfort him, but because Gao Xiong had a kind of charisma that could attract others. Just from this point, Yu Guang still lacked experience, so at present, appointing him as the head of the navy was a natural thing to do. The compliment made Gao Xiong burst into tears, but no one around him laughed at him, because they had also walked out like this. After comforting Gao Xiong, he went to see the new members of Cold Front. As usual, everyone was given a Type 95 pistol, which was a happy scene. At the same time, he learned from Gao Xiong that in the past 6 months, ever since they had gotten their new weapons, they had continuously defeated several nearby pirates and recruited some talents. Their numbers had increased from less than 30 people in the beginning to more than 300 people now. Of course, all the people were young and strong, and had no worries, completely meeting Yang Chendong's recruitment requirements. This was something that couldn't be helped. Before they had enough strength, it would be easy to be exposed if they looked for someone with a family. One day, after they had their own real base, they could look for someone with a family. Even all the soldiers had to have a family. This was a sustainable development. And this real base, Yang Chendong already had a target, which was not far from Fuzhou, Qiqian City. Today, Qiqian City hasn't been developed too much. The entire city's residents were only a few tens of thousands. But with a few hundred against tens of thousands, even if they won, they wouldn't be able to defend. Gao Xiong, you have to continue to expand your strength and recruit more soldiers. Is there a problem with the money? Reporting to the sixth young master, there's no problem with the money. We robbed a lot, so we're still rich. When the sixth young master goes back, you can take some back. Hee, it's just that we don't have enough weapons, and we don't have enough ammunition. Gao Xiong scratched his head with an embarrassed expression. With the Type 87 automatic grenade launcher, it was very satisfying to fight against other pirates. With a 6x30 scope telescope in hand, often the enemy didn't even notice them, and they could take the initiative to attack. Of course, they returned with a great victory. The enemy lost before they could even react. But the problem, the consumption of ammunition was too much. Whenever there was a battle, Gao Xiong would yell, "Bomb! Bum!" However, when the battle was over, they would curse again, saying that these brats didn't know how to fight, and how many cannonballs they fired in this battle, etc. So when the battle started, everyone didn't know what to do. As a result, close combat occurred. Even the Type 81 assault rifles were not willing to use bullets. Instead, they used primitive bows and arrows. Because of this, one of their brothers was injured in a battle. They had no choice but to use guns to solve the problem. Listening to Gao Xiong and Yue Guang's report, Yang Chendong shook his head. This is wrong. You know, a soldier's life is always the most valuable, and weapons are just an auxiliary means. If there are no more weapons, they can be made. If there are no more bullets, they can be produced. This time, I mobilized the craftsmen to solve this problem. But if a soldier loses his life, then there's nothing left. Do you understand? Yang Chendong said sternly, which made Gao Xiong, Yue Guang and the others excited. They felt honored to have such a master. They also knew that in the next war, they didn't need to be too stingy with ammunition, so the safety of the soldiers would be more guaranteed. These words also imperceptibly raised the status of Li Xuanfu and Wu Gang. They believed that in the future, no one would be bad to them, and no one would find trouble with them. Next, in order to make Gao Xiong and Yue Guang feel relieved, Yang Chendong let Tiger's man unload the new cannons and ammunition one by one. Type 04 35mm automatic grenade launcher, weight 48 Gene, length 1023 mm, effective range 1750 meters, capacity 30 rounds. Type 75 82mm recoilless cannon, effective range 2000 meters. Type 75 105mm recoilless cannon, effective range 7,400 meters. The reason why the howitzers and recoilless cannons were chosen was because the Navy's hull could withstand it. Otherwise, there would be more choices. In this way, when the shells were fired, the damage to the ship would be minimal, and at least the ship would not capsize. Gao Xiong and Yue Guang were naturally excited to have 3 new types of cannons. Even Leng Song and Tung Shan were greedy when they saw this. But today's army simply did not need these things. Even if they recently recruited some soldiers from the Navy, the number of soldiers was still less than 30. These people really did not need to be equipped with such powerful cannons. The cannons are given to you. Only veterans can operate them. As for the new recruits, they can use crossbows and crossbows first. When they pass Lung Feng's assessment and become a regular soldier, then they can be equipped with guns. This is the principle, do you understand? Yang Chendong looked at the excited faces of the people and began to pour cold water on them. He absolutely could not let the new recruits touch guns. If there was any internal strife, it would be an irreparable loss. Yes, sir. Everyone replied. For the 6th young master, they all respected him very much. His words were like an imperial edict. Also, the cannons and guns are given to you, but the amount of ammunition is limited. I can't stay here for a long time. What if you use too much? Then you have to find a way to be self-sufficient. Those blacksmiths will be your suppliers. With their current abilities, it is impossible for them to make guns and cannons, but they should be able to make ammunition with some effort. In short, think of a way to get whatever they need. Other than not being able to use guns on land, you can do whatever you want on the sea. The Ming Dynasty was still restricted from the sea. Naturally, they did not have to worry about doing anything that would provoke them. Therefore, it was fine even if they made a big move on the sea. Understood. Hearing that they could let the blacksmiths make ammunition, if they succeeded, the power of these weapons would be even greater. For a moment, everyone promised that the blacksmiths' needs were everyone's needs. They would not hold them back. Seeing that everyone had expressed their stance, Yang Chendong was finally relieved. I am not worried about you guys doing things. Also, clean up this area as soon as possible. At the same time, send people to investigate the situation in Crimson City. We need to get a detailed map of the city's defenses. We also need to sneak in. Once the time is right, we will take over that place. This is good, this is good. Hearing that they were going to open up a new territory, Gao Xiong was so happy that he almost jumped up. The place they were currently at was called the Black Pier. The reason why it was called that was enough to show that it could not be exposed. If they had their own island, they would be able to do whatever they wanted. They would no longer have to be on tenterhooks like they were now, afraid that one day they would be discovered and swallowed up. Seeing that everyone was so focused on the matter of taking over Crimson City, Yang Chendong knew that the morale of the troops could be used. Once the time was right, these people would be vicious wolves and would display endless strength. Alright, didn't you say that you got a few new ships? Let's go take a look. At the Bay of the Black Pier, there were 8 ships of various sizes. Among them, 2 of the larger ships were level 4 ships, and 6 were level 5 warships. From the initial 2 ships to the current 8 ships, it was proof of the efforts of Gao Xiong and Yu Guang. Regarding this, Yang Chendong praised them but also made a request, saying that it was not enough. From the number of people to the number of warships, it was not enough. In response, Gao Xiong and Xiaoshan immediately expressed that with the addition of the new cannons, they would immediately go out to sea and become stronger. The previous Type 87 grenade launcher could shoot up to 1750 meters, and was called a mini-infantry cannon. It was powerful, but it was still a bit small. But now, with the recoilless cannon that could shoot up to 7,400 meters, they were naturally 100 times more confident. This meant that they could attack the enemy ships from a long distance. Before the people arrived, they were already scared. Then, when the Type 95 and Type 81 guns were used in close range, they would naturally be successful. Yang Chendong saw that everyone was full of confidence, and also felt that it was a bit funny, using the weapons of the future to fight the cold weapons of the present, occasionally encountering cannons. At most the cannons were the kind that loaded from the muzzle, and did not have any rifling inside the barrel. It was really not a challenge. The inspection at the Black Docks allowed Yang Chendong to have a better understanding of his own strength. The number of official members who passed the cold front examination had reached close to 70, and there were still some who were passing the examination or preparing for the examination. Counting from this, it was only a matter of time before he passed the 100 mark. Perhaps not long after, the number of people would reach a few hundred, or even more. At that time, he would have a certain level of self-protection. With the advanced weapons given to them, even if someone wanted to harm him, they would only be courting death. Of course, before all of this became a reality, he still had to keep a low profile, and even curry favor with some people. Thinking about it, the gift that he sent to head eunuch Wang Zhen should have arrived at the capital, Beijing. The capital, also known as Shuntian Prefecture. At this moment, in a courtyard not far from the palace, the old butler Yang Hai saw the tense Wang Zhen. Wang Zhen was the eunuch in charge of the ceremony directorate under Ming Yingzong Zhuqizhen. He was once the director of the Eastern Palace, serving the crown prince, who later became Emperor Yingzong. Even the emperor, Ming Yingzong, affectionately called him Mr. It could be said that he had a stable position and held great power. Chapter 22. One day, Wang Zhen saw that the founding emperor, Zhu Yuanzong, had set up a plaque that read, "Officials are not allowed to interfere in government affairs." He was in a bad mood and ordered for it to be removed. The next day, everyone went to court and found that the founding emperor's letter was gone. However, they all remained silent. From this, one could see how powerful he was. Wang Zhen, date of birth unknown, was from Shaanxi's Yuzhou, present-day Hebei. He had once served the crown prince Zhu Qizhen in his studies. This person valued power and was especially concerned about how others viewed him. Thus, any official who was promoted had to give him a gift. Any official who returned to the capital also had to give him a gift. Otherwise, trouble would come knocking. Speaking of which, this was related to his background. During the final years of Yongle, the imperial court issued a decree. The general idea was that any official in the education bureau of each province or city who did not perform well could be transferred to the capital to become an official. There was such a good thing? If one could not make a name for themselves locally, they could actually be transferred to the capital to become an official. Of course not. The reason why no one cared was that the job they would do after being transferred to the capital was rather special. Enter the palace to train female officials. What a joke! Even if this old man did not want to be an official, he could still be a commoner. Why would he want to be a eunuch in the palace? That's right, who would do such a stupid thing? However, there was someone who did it. He was Wang Zhen. He already had a wife and a child. Although he was not well off, he was not poor either. He could live his life peacefully. However, in his heart, there was an ambition that no one could understand. He was not sent to the palace to be a eunuch when he was young. Instead, he entered the palace after studying. He even entered the palace with a certain amount of debt. Since it was difficult for him to develop locally, he wanted to find another path. Needless to say, with his ability to observe people's expressions and patience, he really did make a name for himself. In the past, Yang Chendong did not know much about this person. However, he had a large warehouse with many historical books. Naturally, he found out about this person. After asking around, he found that it was indeed so. At that moment, Yang Chendong invited the old housekeeper, Yang Hai, to meet Wang Zhen. After all, Yang Hai had followed his master, Yang Rong, in the past and had seen the world. At that time, Wang Zhenyuan did not have the authority he had now. When he saw the three Yangs, he was always polite and courteous. It was appropriate for him to send Yang Hai, an old acquaintance, to present the gift. Yang Chendong's predecessor, Yang Dong, didn't know much about history. He also didn't know much about how things came to be. However, he had a large warehouse with books. There were also many ready-made books, materials, and even finished products for reference. Some things that didn't exist in the Ming Dynasty could be dismantled, or reassembled. This was his biggest advantage. Naturally, he could create many new things. In Wang Zhen's home in the capital, Yang Hai saw Wang Zhen with a respectful expression, and Wang Zhen was extremely pleased. Back then, in order to win the favor of Sanyang, He had to curry favor with Sanyang on the surface, obey everything, and pretend that he did not interfere in political affairs. Every time he went to the cabinet to deliver the emperor's decree, he would pretend to be very respectful and careful. He would always stand outside the door and not enter the pavilion, which deeply moved Sanyang. Later, when Wang Zhen came to deliver the decree, Sanyang broke the custom and specially invited Wang Zhen to sit in the room. Now he needed to look up. Now that the steward of that person had changed from arrogance to deference in front of him, it was far from the arrogance he had when he followed Yang Rong around. He felt a burst of refreshing feeling. Butler Yang, speaking of which, we are old acquaintances. We have known each other for many years. Wang Zhen deliberately brought up the past to see what Yang Hai would say. Before coming, Yang Hai had already adjusted his attitude. In the past, when Master Yang Rong was still alive, he could still look down on others. However, 30 years had passed, and many things had changed. Yes, I have known Eunuch Wang for many years. At that time, I could see that you were extraordinary. Sure enough, it was true. Some were only sighing, and even a little envious. These words made Wang Zhen feel very pleased after hearing them. The proudest thing for a person was to make those who looked down on him start to look up to him. And now he had done it. How could he not be happy? Haha. After laughing contentedly, Wang Zhen looked at the things wrapped behind Yang Hai and asked casually, "Why did you come to see me?" Without the word, eunuch, it gave off a very different feeling. However, Yang Hai acted as if he did not hear it and said respectfully, "It's like this. Our family's 6th young master admires Eunuch Wang's talent and ability very much. This time, when he heard that this little one was coming to the capital, he prepared a gift early and asked me to send it to you as a token of appreciation." Yang family's 6th young master? Is that the person who made the toilet bowl and wrote 2 miscellaneous books? Unexpectedly, Wang Zhen had heard of Yang Chendong. Yang Hai immediately showed a flattered expression and said, "If our family's 6th young master knew that Eunuch Wang still remembered him, he would be so happy that he would not be able to sleep." Haha. Wang Zhen, who was flattered, was very happy that Yang Rong's descendant respected him so much. This is nothing. Speaking of which, the 6th young master is quite talented and has made a lot of noise. You don't know, but now the palace has started to use the toilet bowl. Even the emperor said that it was good. Is that so? Then it must be because of Eunuch Wang's recommendation. Yang Hai said without taking the credit. Looking at Yang Hai, who was so sensible, Wang Zhen was happy. He liked to deal with sensible people. However, he was now more curious about what the 6th young master of the Yang family would give him. He thought that such a person should be extraordinary. In time, Yang Hai felt Wang Zhen's gaze on the gift. Immediately, he turned around and opened the package. Suddenly, 2 clear mirrors and 2 sets of beautifully packaged cosmetics appeared in the hall. This is a mirror. It can clearly reflect every part of a person's body. The effect is many times better than a bronze-level mirror. Also, there are 2 sets of cosmetics. Once a woman uses them, she can stay young forever and look even younger and prettier. There were not many gifts, only 2 items and 4 pieces. However, no matter which one it was, it could be considered a valuable gift. This made Wang Zhen blink his eyes. Excitement was already written on his face. He knew about the mirror. A few months ago, the Jianing prefectural magistrate presented it to the emperor. At that time, Ingzong was so happy that he even went to take a good look at it every day before the court. Some of the concubines in the harem also liked it. However, it was impossible to buy it even if they had money. In order to please the emperor, Wang Zhen used some methods. He sent people from the East Palace to look for it, but there was no news. Unexpectedly, there were 2 of them at once. How could he not be happy? As for the cosmetics that could preserve one's youth, it was even better. If he gave it to the emperor, those concubines would fight for it. At that time, wouldn't he be the one who made the biggest contribution? Exclaiming about the effects and benefits of these gifts, Wang Zhen was very happy. Good. But where did these things come from? In response to Eunuch Wang's question, our young master knows a foreigner named John. He brought these things from the sea. Unfortunately, the journey was too long, so we only got these. Our sixth young master also said that if eunuch Wang likes them, he will find a way to send more to you in the future. Before coming, he had been told not to send too many good gifts. Otherwise, the effect would be greatly reduced. Of course, Yang Hai understood the meaning and knew how to say it. Hearing that these things came from the sea, Wang Zhen suddenly understood and nodded. He was wondering why there were so many people sent out, but there were no clues. It turned out that these things did not come from the great Ming Dynasty. The Ming Dynasty's sea route was cut off after Zheng He. As people kept mentioning the threat of the sea, fear of the sea became mainstream, and Wang Zhen was one of them. In his view, the army of the Ming Dynasty was naturally able to dominate the land, but when it came to the sea, there were too many unknowns. Now that he knew the origin of these goods, he valued these two gifts even more. These were things that came from afar, and it was rare. It also showed the importance of Yang Chendong's intentions. Good. Sixth young master is truly considerate. But do you have any requests? Wang Zhen was a smart person. It was precisely because of this that he did not believe that Yang Chendong, who had not even been to the capital, would want to send him gifts. As the saying goes, if one were to lower oneself to others, one must have a request. Seeing that Wang Zhen was in a good mood, Yang Hai knew that the time had come. He said, "The Yang clan's matriarch passed away not long ago. As the youngest son, the sixth young master has to stay at home to take care of the family, so he won't be coming to the capital for the time being. However, before the matriarch passed away, she had a wish. She hoped that the sixth young master could take over the old master's mantle, work for the court, and be loyal to the emperor. She also said that if there was a chance in the future, he would learn from eunuch Wang." Haha! Wang Zhen laughed heartily. He did not believe that a good person would be willing to learn from a eunuch like him. However, since he had accepted the gift, he had to do something. Furthermore, it was such a valuable gift that he could not take it for free. This was also a kind of professional integrity. Besides, this request was not too high. He just wanted an official position. Just based on the fact that his father was Yang Rong, an auxiliary minister of the 5 dynasties, his family should have been treated with evil. Alright, this duke understands. If there is a chance, this duke will ask the emperor for a job for the 6th young master. Thank you, eunuch Wang. In addition, the 6th young master's Yang Bao is about to enter the capital, but there are some people who criticize it, saying that some of the things written in it are not Confucian. But in truth, most of it records matters of loyalty to the emperor, as well as the glorious achievements of my great Ming dynasty. It is accompanied by a few fabricated stories to make people laugh. Speaking of which, this is just something that the 6th young master casually wrote. It has no other meaning than to make a name for himself. Sir, you also know that the 6th young master is only 16 this year. In addition, 20% of it belongs to eunuch Wang. Chapter 23. Yang Hai recalled that the Yang Bao had followed him into the capital, so he decided to foreshadow this matter and report it in advance. Of course, according to what Yang Chendong said, privately running a newspaper could be a big or small matter. It mainly depended on how it was said. Once it was just a storytelling book, it would give people a preconceived idea. As long as Wang Zhen approved of it, it would not be a big problem to implement it. It was just paying 20% of the benefits. In the long run, it was worth it. When he first heard Yang Chendong's instructions, Yang Hai was shocked by the 6th young master's generosity. He directly gave away 20% of the benefits. Only a person with great courage would be able to do it. He even saw the 6th young master's boldness from this matter. He hated that he was old and could not follow the 6th young master for too long. Otherwise, he would definitely bask in the glory of the 6th young master. But fortunately, his son Yang Nung was also capable and young. He could follow the 6th young master in the future. Presumably, he would not have to worry about food and clothing in the future. He told Wang Zhen about the Yang Bao and said that he would give 20% of the benefits. Suddenly, Wang Zhen's eyes narrowed and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. Okay, I will pay attention to this matter. Yang Hai knew that since Wang Zhen said that he would pay attention to it, there would be no problem. He immediately expressed his gratitude again, and then tactfully left. When there was no one else in the room, Wang Zhen's face returned to its serious state. Come. After the voice fell, a person flashed out of the dark room. He was wearing a flying fish robe and holding a spring-embroidered saber. He half knelt and said, I will listen to your orders. Ji Guang, immediately go and investigate the Yang Bao. See what it is, who is against it, and who is supporting it. Investigate clearly and report back to me. Wang Zhen's eyes narrowed into a line. Without investigation, there was no right to speak. He would not let things go just because he accepted some things from Yang Chendong. He believed in the conclusion of his own investigation. Ji Guang was his private party. He was originally the commander of Longqing's right guard, Qianshi. Later, he was promoted to Governor Qianshi. Because it was convenient to use him, he was transferred to the position of Qianshi in the Brocade Guards, a lower third-rank official. It was worth mentioning that in the first month of that year, the hereditary position of eunuchs was officially implemented. Yingzong gave Wang Zhen's nephew Wang Lin, the commander of the Imperial Guards, Qianliang, Gao Rang's nephew Gao Yu, Chao Jixiang's brother, Chao Zheng, and Kai Zhong's nephew, Kai Gu. The emergence of this system raised the status of the eunuchs to almost the same as the important ministers. Without a doubt, Wang Zhen was the boss of these people. Naturally, his subordinates would carry out his orders unconditionally and do their best. Wang Zhen wasn't worried about being deceived by Ji Guang's investigation. This was also because it was his first time dealing with Yang Chendong, so he had to be careful. This subordinate understands. Ji Guang replied, then retreated without any signs of life. Wang Zhen was left alone in the hall. He smiled and said, the sixth young master, Yang Jitong Yang Chendong. Interesting. Haha, if you abide by the law, I won't be stingy and give you a good fortune after accepting your gift. With Yang Hai's appearance in the capital, Yang Bao soon appeared here. In order to make it easier for the people in the capital to read, it started from the first issue. The appearance of Legend of the Condor Heroes and Xiao Li's flying dagger naturally attracted the attention of the people in the capital, who were lacking in spiritual food. This was because of the geographical location. Yang Bao was already so famous in Jianing, but because it was too far away from the capital, no one knew about it. This was unlike the modern age where the internet was so developed that even the smallest matter could be hyped up and made known to everyone. The sudden appearance of Yang Bao attracted the attention of many people, but at the same time, it was not well received by some people. They discussed in private about the nature of this report and what it could be used for. It was just that the emperor hadn't said anything, so they couldn't make up their minds and didn't know what to do. Yang Chendong, who had returned to Jianing Prefecture from the Black Wharf, had been paying attention to the movements in the capital. Yang Bao was nothing more than a test. At this time, there was no intellectual property right, and there was no way to guide public opinion. He didn't know whether this thing could gain a foothold in the capital, but he knew that if the great Ming dynasty couldn't accept this, he had to be more careful and cautious in the future. It was even debatable whether he would have a trip to the capital in the future. Under Yang Chendong's attention, the wheel of history continued to turn as usual. On the 14th of July in the 11th year of the Zhengtong dynasty, Yang Pu, the last Yang of the three Yangs, died. Yang Pu's death meant the end of the three Yangs era. Some of their original forces began to suffer a blow, and some forces that wanted to replace them began to stir. More than a month after Yang Pu's death, the incident began to break out. Unexpectedly, Yang Bao, which seemed to have gained a foothold in the capital, was the first to bear the brunt. On this day in the main hall, there was a sudden condemnation against the descendants of Yang Rong. When Yang Rong was in power, he was known as Dongyang. He was the Minister of Works, Assistant Minister, Grand Secretary, and other positions. Naturally, he had great power. Therefore, he promoted some people, but there were only so many positions, so he naturally offended a group of people. Because of this, many people were upset, but they didn't have a chance. Now that Yang Pu was dead and the three Yangs were in decline, there were naturally some people who hit him when he was down. Some people even mistakenly thought that their actions should be in accordance with Wang Zhen's wishes. Because in the third year of the Zhengtong dynasty, there was a fierce struggle for power in the court. The leader of the eunuchs, Wang Zhen, took advantage of the child Ingzong's ignorance and companionship to lure him to play, and then presented him to his playmate to win his favor. With this favor, he went up against the three Yangs. This caused Grand Secretary Yang Shiqi to not attend court. When the Empress Dowager found out, she beat Wang Zhen up and ordered him to apologize to the Yang residents. Wang Zhen held a grudge in his heart and used his vicious methods to make a fuss about the son of the three Yangs. He sued the son of the second Yangs and his friends for taking bribes for personal gain, causing a huge uproar and ruining the reputation of the second Yangs. Under Wang Zhen's desperate investigation, the second Yangs died of anger and depression, leaving Yang Pu as the head to take charge of the court. Now that even Yang Pu was no longer around, wasn't it the best time to step on the descendants of the three Yangs? Yang Bao was the unlucky one that came to the muzzle of the gun. Nihing was one of the people who had been suppressed by the three Yangs. Perhaps his vile nature was seen through early on, but he who felt good about himself had always been suppressed. It wasn't until later on that he sucked up to Wang Zhen that he rose step by step, becoming the Minister of Imperial Affairs and Assistant Minister of Revenue, becoming a rank 3 official. Knowing that Wang Zhen once had a conflict with the Sanyang family, Nihing was eager to show off. He did not ask for Wang Zhen's permission in advance and suddenly attacked the Yang Pao in the court assembly. He even said that the private publication was a troublesome matter, and that it would lead to a disaster in the end. When the officials, including Ingzong, were all confused, Nihing said that the reason why Yang Bao appeared, and was discussed by everyone in the streets and alleys of the capital, and was even sought after by a portion of people, was because it had a dark background. This dark background was the Minister of Personnel, Wang Ji, the Right Assistant Minister, Zhao Xian, and the others. It was because they had received Yang Rong's favor that they secretly supported Yang Bao in the name of repaying his kindness. Nihing's sudden move stunned Ingzong, the officials, and even Wang Zhen. Everyone knew that Nihing had relied on Wang Zhen to get to his position. Because of this, everyone thought that it was Wang Zhen's idea. Many people immediately shut their mouths, afraid that they would be implicated. Wang Ji and Zhao Xian originally didn't want to speak, but this matter involved them, so they had no choice but to speak up. Nihing, you are slandering me. It's only because you did things unfairly that I couldn't help but say a few words to you. You are taking revenge here. Your actions are too vulgar. Besides, when have I ever had any contact with the sixth young master of the Yang family? I don't even know him, so what you are saying is nonsense. Zhao Xian walked out from the group with a face full of indignation. Many people knew that there was a grudge between Nihing and Zhao Xian, the director of the Ministry of Appointments. Nihing framed Zhao Xian because of his grudge. Yang Bao was just an innocent bystander. However, there was one person who saw it very clearly. He was the Ministry of Personnel Minister Wang Ji. Wang Ji had replaced Guo Gu as the Ministry of Personnel Minister in the 8th year of Zhengtang, and was in charge of all officials. Since ancient times, the Ministry of Personnel had a saying that officials were one level higher. Those who were able to occupy this position were all cautious and conscientious people. This time, he was suddenly reprimanded by Nehen in front of the court, because he had a good relationship with Zhao Xian, the director of the Ministry of Appointments. Since he had made a move on this person, if he did not take care of himself, it would not be long before he would be implicated by the counterattack. Thus he had implicated himself. After thinking through the crux of the matter, he was worthy of being a minister. He didn't argue with Nihing like Zhao Xian. Instead, he stood out and said solemnly, I did not know about the matter of Yang Bao. It's just that I've read a few magazines recently, and it's just that there are 2 interesting stories in them. They also talked about the might and glory of our dynasty, and did not do anything to harm the country. I once thought that the person who created this newspaper was very talented. Later, I learned that it was done by the youngest son of Scholar Yang. I was even more impressed that Duke Yang had a successor. Thus, I boldly suggest that the court should promote more talented young people to be used by the country. After speaking, Wang Ji placed the ceremonial tablet on the ground. Then, he knelt down and buried his head deep in the ground. He saw the crux of the matter with one glance. Didn't you, Nihing, attack me with the dark background of Yang Bao? Then I will solve the problem from the root, and clear the name of Yang Bao. Let's see what other tricks you have. Chapter 24. As the minister of the Ministry of Appointments, Wang Ji had the right to recommend someone. Recommending a talented young student in front of the imperial court was the most appropriate move. In addition, Yang Chendong was born in the Yang family. This move could show his virtuous reputation after taking care of his friends. This move was really impeccable. The move to open up another path. Wang Ji's words made Niheng freeze on the spot, and he was somewhat at a loss. He did not expect that the other party would avoid the important and dwell on the trivial, directly pointing out the cause of the matter. This was completely different from what he had thought before. Niheng thought that whether it was Wang Ji or Zhao Xian, they would first find a way to escape and clarify their relationship with Yang Rong. In this way, it was bound to arouse the dissatisfaction of some of the pro-Yang faction in the imperial court. At that time, he only needed to insist that the other party had something to do with it. After all, the influence of the three Yangs was deep and wide. Who in the imperial court could say that they had nothing to do with it? This was called yellow mud falling into the crotch of one's pants. Even if it was not shit, it was shit. Who would have thought that the other party did not evade their relationship with Yang Rong? Perhaps they could not evade it, so they simply took the opportunity to recommend the sixth young master of the Yang family. As a result, his wishful thinking was completely ruined. Wang Ji was worthy of being a minister. Avoiding the important and dwelling on the trivial, and opening up another path completely ruined Niheng's goal. This also made him feel that the situation was not right. He had to look at Wang Zhen, who was standing next to the emperor, for help. At this time, Wang Zhen's old face was stiff, but his heart was abnormally angry. Ji Guang had already investigated the matter of Yang Bao. The result was naturally that it was a story, and a serial article that told a continuous story. Although it recorded some miscellaneous knowledge, it had nothing to do with the system of eunuchs. For a literary magazine like this, there was no threat at all. It could even be said that it was a business method. At least for a few months, it had made a lot of money for Wang Zhen. This made Wang Zhen very happy. Because this was different from bribery, this was a share of the money that he had obtained with his own ability. It was regarded as a legitimate source of money. Wang Zhen was secretly happy about this. And just a few days ago, he even received 2 copies of Yang Bao from the people and gave them to the emperor. Yingzong was also attracted by The Legend of the Condor Heroes. After all, Yingzong was still a child, only 19 years old, and he also liked stories of gratification and revenge. Because of this matter, Yingzong even asked his teacher, Wang Zhen, to find the complete draft of the Condor shooting. He wanted to read it to his heart's content. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he deliberately put in a few good words for Yang Chendong, so that he did not accept these gifts in vain. First, letting Zong have such a person in his heart and slowly form a good impression of him. At that time, being promoted to an official would be a matter of course. Seeing that everything was going smoothly, Niheng suddenly jumped out and almost ruined his plan. How could he not be angry? Of course. What made Wang Zhen even angrier was that Niheng did not inform him before doing this. This was completely an act of his own volition. It could also be seen that Niheng did not care about him at all. Since that was the case, why would he care about it? Now that he saw Niheng's pleading eyes, he really wanted to slap him and have the Eastern Palace guards arrest him. His heart was filled with hatred, but Wang Zhen could not do this. Everyone knew that Niheng had sided with him. If something happened to him today, wouldn't people think that he was weak? In this way, it was inevitable that there would be sudden changes, and it would be detrimental to the peace. Just because his heart was filled with hatred, it did not mean that Wang Zhen would not punish Niheng. At the very least, he wanted to teach him a lesson through this matter. Therefore, he turned around and said to Yingzong with a smile, "Your Majesty, Minister Wang is right. The sixth son of the Yang family, Yang Jitong, for the sake of the reader's pleasure from now on, he will only be called Yang Chendong, is indeed a talent. If such a person can be used by the court, it will be a great thing. As for Niheng and Zhao Xian, roaring in the court is really disgraceful. They can each be beaten 5 times with a rod and thrown out of the court." Good teacher is right. This emperor also has the same thoughts. Come, drag Niheng and Zhao Xian away and beat them 5 times with a rod each. Zong sat up straight and spoke with the appearance of a wise emperor. As soon as he finished speaking, the brocade guards came forward and dragged the two of them out. From beginning to end, the two of them did not speak. Zhao Xian did not dare. He was afraid that if he shouted, it would only make the rod more severe. However, he was still in a state of confusion. From Wang Zhen's words, he finally understood that his master seemed to have some relationship with Yang Qindong. It was hateful that he didn't even understand before making a move. This was simply asking for trouble, and even asking for trouble. The two of them were dragged away. The handsome and imposing Zong's gaze fell on the Minister of Personnel, Wang Ji. Minister Wang, this person was recommended by you. What position should we give Yang Qindong? Because he had read the book Condor Shooting, Zong had a good impression of Yang Qindong. This matter was suggested by Wang Ji, and Wang Zhen agreed. How could he object? Wang Ji raised his head, and a few titles flashed through his mind. Speaking of which, Yang Qindong was still too young. He was only 16 years old, and it was very difficult for him to be given an official position. Today was just a coincidence. However, since the emperor asked, he needed to give an explanation. He said, Your Majesty, this subject believes that Yang Qindong is very intelligent. He became a scholar at the age of 13. He should be able to take up the position of governor of Jianing Prefecture. After he is done with his family, he can be transferred to the capital. The governor of Jianing Prefecture was a 9th-rank official in charge of administrative and civil affairs. However, there was no mention of the previous governor being transferred away. This meant that this position was originally just a position without any real power. It could also be called a scattered official. The biggest difference was that there was an additional official position. Yes, Minister Zhuoqing. Zong nodded his head. Towards a 9th-rank official, he really couldn't bring up the slightest bit of interest. The court was dismissed. At this time, Naihing and Zhao Xian had been sent out of the palace. The officials also acted as if nothing had happened and returned home. However, what they did not know was that history had changed a little. In history, Naihing had a grudge with the Ministry of Personnel's Dr. Zhao Xian. He framed Wang Ji and Assistant Minister Chao Yi, and they were both imprisoned. They both suffered a little. Later, Zong treated them leniently, and Wang Ji and Chao Yi were reinstated. They only took Zhao Xian and Naihing's salary. However, because of the appearance of Yang Bao, Naihing took action in advance and did not implicate Chao Yi. Fortunately, this change was not very big. At least, the general direction of history did not change. Otherwise, Yang Qindong would have a headache. The officials returned home. The Minister of Rights, Hu Ming, also returned home in his official sedan. As soon as he entered the residence, Hu Ming called the housekeeper and asked, Go find Yan, and ask for a copy of Yang Bao. Bring it to my study. Hu Ming had heard about the Yang Bao before, but he did not care about it. In his view, it was far from the orthodox way of Confucius and Mencius, and he disdained to hear about it. However, what happened in the court today made him curious about the Yang Bao. Thinking that his granddaughter had talked about it more than once, he prepared to find a copy to read. The housekeeper quickly went to the young Mrs. courtyard in the backyard. He met the young Mrs. maid Xiaoqing, and told her that the master wanted to read the Yang Bao. Wait. Xiaoqing was a capable maid. The young girl in yellow was always smiling. Her skin was whiter than snow, and her eyes were like a pool of clear water. She turned and ran to the young Mrs. Boudoir. In the room, there was a 14 or 15-year-old girl. Her delicate and elegant face was rosy, and her sandalwood lips were pink. It was inevitable that she would be lost in reverie. At this moment, she was holding a black newspaper and reading it. From time to time, the corners of her mouth would curl up slightly, showing the joy in her heart. Young Mississippi, perhaps because Xiaoqing ran a little faster. She was panting as soon as she entered the boudoir. Her large chest was constantly rising and falling with her rapid breathing. Xiaoqing, what's wrong? What made you so anxious? The young girl seemed to be complaining, but after she finished speaking, she softly leaned forward and said, Could it be that you've taken a fancy to a young and handsome man? After she finished speaking, the young girl couldn't help but giggle. The maid Xiaoqing, frowned and her face fell. She said with an unyielding expression, "Young miss, you're making fun of Xiaoqing again. I've already said that I will follow young miss for the rest of my life. I will not marry." "Ah. Don't tell me you want to warm the bed of my future husband? Bah. You really don't know shame." The young girl was Hu Yan, the granddaughter of the Minister of Rights, Hu Ming. What? When she realized that she was being teased by young miss again, Xiaoqing wasn't going to let it go. She immediately stretched out her slender hands and tickled Hu Yan's armpits. Although this was the social practice of the time, the personal maid who married into the family could actually warm the bed of the new son-in-law on behalf of their young mistress. However, there were some things that couldn't be said. How could a thin-skinned person endure it? Only Hu Yan and Xiaoqing, who had grown up together, could make such a joke. If there was a trace of misunderstanding between the master and the maid, such a joke would only increase the conflict between them. Xiaoqing's hand moved and for a moment, the two girls were playing together. Waves of giggles could be heard incessantly. When the steward, who was waiting outside, heard this, he helplessly shook his head. He knew that Xiaoqing, this careless maid, must have forgotten her mission. He couldn't help but lightly cough a few times. "Ah." When she heard the steward's voice, Xiaoqing quickly stopped moving her hands. She seemed to have thought of something and said, "The steward is still waiting outside. Young miss, old master wants to read Yong Bao." What? Hu Yan also blocked the hand that was about to sneak up on Xiaoqing's armpits. She asked in disbelief. Chapter 25. Yong Bao had been in the capital for quite some time. However, Hu Yan, who rarely left the house, didn't know about it at first. At that time, it was very important for women not to leave the house. But one day, when she entered her father's study to help clean, she accidentally saw a copy of Yong Bao on the table. Hu Yan's father was Hu Zhao's eldest son, Hu Changning. At that time, he held the position of protector of the Brocade Guard, and was a fourth-rank official. As a member of the Brocade Guard, it was necessary for him to have political awareness and vigilance. For something as new as Yong Bao, it was impossible for him not to study it. Therefore, he brought a copy of Yong Bao back home. However, other than the wonderful story and some general knowledge about life, he really couldn't see any negative thoughts in it. Therefore, he casually put it on the desk. He didn't want to become a treasure in the eyes of women. Speaking of treasure, it naturally referred to the wonderful stories inside. This was also the tragedy of society at that time. Women only paid attention to the 3 obediences and 4 virtues. They could only read women's commandments, internal discipline, Analects of Women and other boring books. They had long been bored of reading similar books. Suddenly, there was an edition of Shooting Condor and Xiao Li's Flying Dagger. Among them, the silly Guojing and the affectionate Li Xuanhuan made Hu Yan unable to put them down. She felt as if she had seen another world. It was full of novelty, curiosity, and amazement. Soon this issue of Yong Bao was finished. She could even recite it backwards. At this moment, Hu Yan only hated that there was only this one issue. Moreover, this was neither the first nor the last issue. This story really had no beginning and no end, and it made people unhappy. This unhappiness quickly turned into anxiety. She anxiously waited for an entire afternoon. When her father finished his work and returned home in the evening, she anxiously begged him, saying that she wanted to read more of Yong Bao. Hu Changning was the eldest son of the Hu clan. He was deeply loved by Hu Xiao and greatly favored by the emperor. Because of this, he entered the important department of the Brocade Guard. Don't be fooled by his stern face when he was working, giving people a feeling that strangers shouldn't get close to him. In fact, he was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. He was especially fond of his little daughter. Faced with Hu Yan's seemingly unreasonable pestering, Hu Zhangning finally gave in and promised to bring more copies of Yong Bao home. With Hu Zhangning's guarantee, Hu Yan was happy. Her father even used his privilege to find the first issue of Yong Bao, which satisfied her request. The story finally had an end. But because Yong Bao had only been developed in the capital for a short period of time, and had yet to reach the finale, she could only wait in torment. The Yong Bao was not published once a day, but once every 5 days. One could finish reading the entire Yongbao in less than an hour. The following 4 days would be a long wait. During this time, Huyen also had some thoughts and went to research the person who wrote this story. It was written very clearly in Yongbao that the Condor Shooter and Xiao Li's Flying Dagger Department were written by the same author. It was Yang Chendong, the youngest and sixth young master of the Yang clan. Huyen had heard her grandfather talk about this person. It was said that he had become a scholar at the age of 13. At that time, Hu Xiao was very envious of him at home, saying that Yang Rong had a successor. Huyen's memory was not bad. Just by hearing this, she had some impression. Since Yang Chendong was the author, Huyen couldn't help but be curious about how this person's brain worked. What was in it? How could he come up with such a wonderful story? She wanted to know more about Yang Chendong, so she went to her grandfather's place, hoping to find out more about him. What kind of person was Hu Xiao? It was not an exaggeration to say that he was a shrewd person. In history, to be able to hold the position of Minister of Rites during the Ming Xuanzong dynasty, he had experienced the 4 dynasties of Emperor Ying, Emperor Jing, and Emperor Xian for more than 30 years without falling. How could ordinary people compare to him? When his granddaughter, Huyen, appeared, just a few words from her made him feel a trace of a different flavor. He also asked a few words and found out about the Yongbao. Only then did he know why his granddaughter wanted to know about the Yang clan's 6th young master. This was the first time Hu Xiao heard the name Yongbao. However, he had never paid much attention to it. What kind of good thing could a 15 or 16-year-old youth write? What kind of thing was worthy of his attention? Therefore, even though his granddaughter had recommended it several times, he had never looked at it. Today's court assembly had started with Yongbao and ended with Yongbao. Yang Chendong had become the governor of Jianing Prefecture at the age of 16. Although it was a very small 9th-rank official, it was undoubtedly an official's position. Moreover, he did not rely on his family to obtain it. This naturally piqued Hu Xiao's interest, and he wanted to see what was written in Yongbao. In particular, Hu Xiao's sharp senses told him that Wang Zhen seemed to have a good impression of the Yang clan's 6th young master. This was the most inconceivable thing to him. Who in the court did not know about the conflicts between Wang Zhen and San Yang? In the past, whenever it involved San Yang, no matter who it was, they would be trampled on by Wang Zhen. However, as Yang Rong's son, the most direct descendant of his family, he was fine. Could it be that Wang Zhen had changed his strategy? Or did the root cause appear in Yang Chendong? Hu Xiao carefully considered the cause and effect, and found that it should be the latter. This was because a few days ago, an official who was on good terms with San Yang had been arrested by Dong Shi. If Wang Zhen had such intentions, he should not have changed his mind so quickly. If that was the case, then Yang Chendong was somewhat interesting. He was clearly Yang Rong's son, but he could obtain Wang Zhen's support. How did he do it? Of course, Hu Xiao did not believe that Yang Chendong had done everything by himself. He guessed that there must be some expert. Who was this person? This really piqued his curiosity. He asked the butler to find Yongbao to see if he could find any clues from it. In Mrs. Room, Huyen immediately became happy after knowing that the maid Xiaoqing was not joking. Great, grandfather also wants to read Yongbao? Then I'll send it to him immediately. There was a reason why Huyen was so happy. She had asked Xiaoqing to go out and find out that Yongbao first appeared in Yang Chendong's hometown, Jianing Mansion, and Yang Chendong was there. It was later spread to the capital. She also heard that Xiao Li's Flying Dagger and Xiao Li's Condor had been published before Yu Jianing. They seemed to have finished their drafts, and even the whole book seemed to have been published. For this matter, Hu Xiao had asked his father, Hu Changning, more than once to send someone to Jianing Mansion to buy 2 copies of the 2 completed books. However, his father refused. In his opinion, Yongbao was published once every 5 days in the capital, and they could slowly read it. Moreover, it was a miscellaneous book. Girls should be more mature and not always want to listen to novel stories. After that, Huyen was angry for several days. However, she knew that her father was very generous to let her read Yongbao once every 5 days, so she really did not dare to ask too much. But now, her grandfather wanted to read Yongbao, which was equal to an opportunity. As long as she seized it, she might be able to read the 2 complete books in advance. That was really great. Then Hu Yan took out several well-preserved copies of Yang Bao, hurried out of the backyard, and went straight to her grandfather's study. After a while, Hu Yan's coquettish voice came out of the study. "Grandfather, these two stories are very interesting. For example, Xiao Li's Condor is about the struggle between the Han people and the Mongolian Yuan Empire. It shows a kind of national integrity, but I don't know what the ending is." Blinking her beautiful big eyes, Hu Yan had an aggrieved look on her face. Hu Xiao shook his head gently. How could he not see that his granddaughter was playing hard to get? She wanted to take the opportunity to ask him to get the complete books of Xiao Li's Flying Dagger and Xiao Li's Flying Dagger. He had heard that the complete books had appeared in Jianing before. Although there were not many of them, they could not be considered too few. At least for someone like Hu Xiao who had been in the officialdom for decades, if he wanted to get it, he could find a way. However, Hu Xiao still did not have the intention to agree. He wanted to see how Yang Bao was first. Just like that, with his granddaughter sighing from time to time, Hu Chang just treated it as a joke. He sat in the armchair and slowly read Yang Bao. However, only he himself knew what he was really thinking. This scene was not just happening in the Hu residence. After today's morning court, Hu knew how many important ministers and officials in the capital began to search for Yang Bao. While they were trying to understand it, no one knew what they were thinking. Others might still be watching and thinking about the deeper meaning of this scene in the morning court. But one person did not have the time to think about this, nor did they know what was happening in the imperial court. He was currently giving Tiger's Mane his last lesson. In short, the intelligence department is the clairvoyant and the clairvoyant. If they can know what is going on ahead of time, they can have more time to deal with the problem. Often, they can turn the tables. After saying this, Yang Qindong patted Tiger's Mane on the shoulder, his eyes filled with hope and expectation. The establishment of the Security Bureau was the matter that Yang Qindong had been paying the most attention to recently, and intelligence was of the utmost importance. Intelligence warfare referred to the confrontation of intelligence systems between the enemy and our side in order to achieve military victory and protect our side's cases and interests. Obtaining an advantage in intelligence was an important guarantee for military victory. Just like the Ming Dynasty's Eastern Faction Guards and the Imperial Secret Service, when they were at their most powerful, could the Emperor know what his subordinates were doing last night? Were they happy or disappointed? Did they drink when they were happy? Did they sigh when they were disappointed? Chapter 26. Being familiar with all the situations of the staff played a very positive role in better controlling them and understanding them. Yang Qindong wanted to establish the Security Bureau, first of all, for his own safety, and to use this department for his own use. Naturally, the person in charge became the top priority. After thinking about it, Tiger's Mane was chosen. Not for anything else, but because of his loyalty. Yang Qindong had no doubt that if someone wanted to kill him, Tiger's Mane would be like a motionless wall, blocking in front of him. If he couldn't trust the person who accompanied him since childhood, then who in the world could really make him feel at ease and truly believe? Tiger's Mane was chosen, and then he was singled out by Yang Qindong and trained for a long time. At the same time, Yang San was also trained. This person's character was calm and taciturn. In some ways, such a character was suitable for intelligence work. So he was trained as Tiger's Mane's deputy. Because the two of them were ignorant about intelligence, Yang Qindong taught them step by step, and it took them 2 months to finally give them a deeper understanding of intelligence issues and how to operate. At this point, the Security Bureau was established, and Tiger's Mane became the first director, and Yang San was the deputy director. For the time being, there were only 2 of them in the entire Security Bureau. But Yang Qindong believed that it wouldn't take long for this department to grow. In order for this day to come sooner, he took out 10,000 taels of silver at once to show his support for this day. Many things were on the right track, such as Yang Bao and the Four Seas restaurant, which could be described as making a lot of money every day. However, even so, compared to the gains of Gao Xiong's navy, it was still a small matter. Robbery is always the fastest way to make money. This is an indisputable fact. With money, naturally, you have to do what you like to do, what you should do. What he liked to do was naturally to breathe freely. He wanted to enjoy everything as much as possible, while also bringing his influence to the world. Leaving his name in the annals of history was the goal of many people. Speaking of which, Yang Qindong did not have any ill feelings towards Great Ming. Compared to other dynasties, it was still much better. Compared to the political marriage between the Han and the Tang, the alliance between the Tang and the Song, they showed their unyielding character. They did not engage in political marriage, did not compensate, did not cede land, and did not pay tribute. The Son of Heaven guards the gates of the country, and the monarch dies for the country. Just how heroic was this? Everyone who heard this couldn't help but tremble in excitement. Yang Qindong naturally admired such a country. Unfortunately, prosperity was followed by decline. Ever since Ingzong's Timu Castle incident, the Ming dynasty had entered the middle of its decline. Towards the end, he was overthrown by the commoners who did not have enough to eat. In the end, he allowed a few 100,000 people to become the emperor, ruling over the Han people for over 200 years. Later on, when the Eight-Nation Alliance entered Beijing, the Qing government was unable to cede land and pay compensation, causing China to suffer a great loss. These were all historical events. However, since Yang Qindong had accidentally come here, he naturally would not allow such things to happen again. He wanted to change everything as much as possible. He wanted to find a way to make Huaxia stronger, and even make it the true center of the world. One day, every Chinese person would be able to walk out with their head held high. Whenever he introduced himself as a Huaxian to others, he would receive heartfelt respect and reverence from others. At that time, he would not let down the heavens, allowing him to live another life. Of course, doing all of this was extremely difficult. Yang Qindong understood how big the world was much better than the people of the Ming dynasty. However, it was because he understood that he had confidence. It was because of the weapons in the warehouse that were hundreds of years more advanced. When a person had enough power, it was terrifying. This was because with just a thought, the commoners would suffer. If they were not careful, they would become sinners for eternity. On the other hand, if such power was used to benefit the commoners and the country, it would also play an extremely positive role. Yang Qindong's idea was the latter. He hoped that through his own efforts, he could change the outcome of the Ming dynasty being destroyed in a few hundred years. He also wanted to change the situation where the Han people were slaves. All of this would undoubtedly be a lofty goal, and he would need to put in a lot of effort to achieve it. Taking advantage of the Ming dynasty's maritime ban, he had worked hard to build a powerful navy. Now he had also worked hard to establish the Security Bureau. Fortunately, Tiger's Mane and Yang San were both diligent and eager to learn. They carried forward the spirit of not being ashamed to ask for help. This allowed them to learn a lot in the past 2 months, and their understanding of security and intelligence had reached a new level. At this time, Yang Qindong had to think more about his own safety. This was because he was not unknown. It was just that once he walked the path of power, he could only move forward and not turn back. Otherwise, it would be as if he had stepped into a bottomless abyss, and not even his bones would be left. He took out 10,000 taels of silver and handed it to Tiger's Mane. He said, "You should familiarize yourself with your work as soon as possible, and then recruit people. Remember what I taught you before. Don't underestimate the role of any one person. Often, big things are caused by small people. Perhaps a street gangster, a peddler, a street sweeper, or even a beggar will play a key role in certain situations. Therefore, the people you use are destined to not stick to one pattern." Do you understand the meaning of this sentence? Young master, we understand. What you mean is that as long as people are useful to us, we can rope them in. Even those useless people, as long as they have ambitions, can be used as our hidden pawns. Who knows when they will be activated, and then they will play an unimaginable role. Tiger's Mane thought about what the 6th young master had said and taught him, and summarized his answer. Very good. He gave them an encouraging look. All right, you can leave now. Don't be too anxious. Think about what to do next. Once you have decided on something, don't worry about it. Don't be afraid of spending money. The young master doesn't lack that. Yes. Tiger's Mane and Yang San left with excited expressions. How could this not be their chance? To be able to catch the young master's attention was a great opportunity in itself. After the two left, Xiao Yin appeared in a flash, as if she had been prepared. She brought a pot of freshly boiled tea to Yang Chendong. "Young master, you must be thirsty after talking for so long. Come and drink some tea. This is good tea that the young master spent a lot of money to get from the capital. All right, then drink some good flower tea. Then hurry up and write the smiling, proud wanderer." Yang Chendong, who had already seen through Xiao Yin's intentions, laughed heartily. This caused the girl's face to turn red. After The Legend of the Condor Heroes and Xiao Li's Flying Dagger, Yang Chendong wrote the third novel, The Smiling, Proud Wanderer. It was Master Jin Yang's later work, and its narrative had already reached the pinnacle of perfection. The Smiling, Proud Wanderer involved countless scenes, characters, and all kinds of martial artists fighting. But after being written, the scenes changed according to the mood. There were endless changes, but they were all suitable for life. The core of The Smiling, Proud Wanderer was the struggle for power in the martial arts world. In order to achieve this goal, the author seized the Bixia Sword Manual and Sunflower Manual. The work praised chivalry, benevolence, wealth and honor, and the noble spirit of unyielding might. Once this book was published, it suppressed the Condor Heroes and Xiao Li's Flying Dagger, becoming the object and goal of everyone in Jianing Prefecture. Among them, Yang Fu was laughing so hard that his eyes almost couldn't be seen. The Four Seas restaurant expanded again, swallowing up 2 neighboring restaurants. But it was still difficult to find a restaurant. Although he could only get 30% of the profits, he still earned more in a month than he did in a year. Once The Smiling, Proud Wanderer was published, Yang Chendong became an influential figure again. Now in Jianing Prefecture, even the children who had just started to understand things knew of his great name. It could be seen that his influence was widespread. While everyone was talking about the Smiling, Proud Wanderer, the open-minded and unruly Ling Huchong, the beautiful and shrewd Ren Yingying, the treacherous and cunning Yu Buqian, the rebellious and scheming Ren Wuxing, the pure and lovesick Yi Lin, the modest and strange Chong Su, and so on, the imperial court's appointment arrived. The news of the Yang clan's 6th young master, the founder of Yang Bao, the author of the Condor Heroes, The Smiling, Xiao Li's Flying Dagger, and The Smiling, Proud Wanderer, was appointed as the governor of Jianing Prefecture by the emperor. His official rank was 9th rank. The 6th young master of the Yang clan, who was only 16 years old, actually had an official position early on. It was said that the emperor had discussed this appointment with the various officials during the morning court session. Even some 3rd or 4th rank officials might not have such an honor. Then this 9th rank official's status is really too high. Even some 3rd or 4th rank officials might not have such an honor. Thinking of Yang Chendong's age, it could be said that his future was limitless. Therefore, once the appointment was announced, the Yang clan's old residence's gate was trampled flat by the nobles of Jianing Prefecture. Some even found matchmakers, wanting to marry their daughters and relatives' daughters to the 6th young master. It could be seen that there were really a lot of smart people. Everyone wanted to invest in a potential stock, hoping to get more returns in the future. In the front courtyard of the Yang clan's old residence, Yang Hai was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. As an elder of the Yang clan, he had personally experienced the Yang clan's rise and fall. Especially when the mistress, Yang Liushi, passed away. The one she couldn't forget was the young 6th young master. But who would have thought that in just over a year, Yang Chendong would be so promising? He had an official position at the age of 16. Even when his old home was still alive, it couldn't compare. And today's prosperous scene in the Yang clan's courtyard was probably something that only happened when the old master was in his golden age. Chapter 27. For a moment, Yang Hai was grinning from ear to ear. He knew that it was because he had gone to the capital, met Wang Zhen, and gave him a gift. But wasn't that what the young master was thinking? Compared to other young people, the 6th young master's calmness was definitely rare. Compared to Yang Hai, who was standing there laughing foolishly, the maid Xiao Yin's expression became very ugly. Especially when some of the matchmakers who had come to play matchmaker saw Xiao Yin ask the 6th young master if he had any intention of marrying a wife, Her face turned red with anger. If not for her face and not wanting to dampen everyone's spirits on this joyous day, she would have chased them away. At the moment, the Yang family's old residence was very lively, but as the person involved, Yang Chendong, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the other servants had already gone to the Yamen of Jianing Prefecture to pay a visit to the prefect, Li Daotong. Li Daotong was a jinshi at the end of the Yongle period of Qingzhou. After a lot of hard work, he was appointed as the prefect of Jianing Prefecture, a fourth-rank official. It was equivalent to the secretary of the municipal committee and the mayor of a modern city. When Li Daotong received the news that Yang Chendong had suddenly sent an invitation to visit, he immediately put down the brush he was writing on and said to the housekeeper, "Please." In the entire Jianing Prefecture, the number of people who could receive Li Daotong's please could be counted on 2 hands. But when it came to people younger than 30 years old, there was no doubt that only Yang Chendong had such qualifications. In the guest room, Li Daotong was sitting precariously. Not long after, Yang Chendong, dressed in a green robe, walked in. When he entered the hall and saw Li Daotong, he quickly bowed and said, "Subordinate Yang Chendong greets lordly. Haha, Prefect Yang, please rise." Li Daotong narrowed his eyes and stood up, reaching out his hand to support Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong smiled and used this force to straighten his body. No matter what, now that he was in Jianing Mansion, there were too many things he needed the other party to take care of. He had to give the other party enough face. Li Daotong was confident in his status. Being able to help a 9th-rank official up was already giving him enough face. Speaking of which, it was nothing more than a case of a man flattering a man. Magistrate Li also knew that Yang Chendong had an official position at such a young age, so his future would be bright. Now he was being courteous to him, but it was just to get some good karma in the future. Yang Chendong, who was given a seat, declined with a smile. Then he sat down on a chair and began to talk about his own affairs. "Lordly, this lowly official's mother has just passed away for more than a year. Her mourning period is not over yet. Please understand." I understand. Your mother was a woman with a title of nobility. Her passing on to the West, this official is also very sad. Governor Yang's filial piety is a matter of course, so there's nothing to worry about. How could Li Daotong not see that this so-called position of governor was originally a non-official position? If he could not understand his superior's intentions and ordered him to start working now, he would be criticized by others. Yang Rong was one of the imperial court's auxiliary ministers. There were countless disciples and former officials. As one of the nobility, Li Daotong should take care of his family. Yang Chendong did this for this reason. He did not want to get involved in some tedious matters. He had been watching the development of the Ming Dynasty coldly. At present he did not want to get involved, so how could he have the intention to serve? Therefore this trip was to express his modesty and respect. The first thing he did after becoming an official was to pay a visit to his superior. If others knew about this, they would only say that he was sensible and knew the rules. Secondly, he would give up all his functions and go home to be an independent person. It was the most important thing to prepare for his big event. It would not be a waste of time. Now that he had obtained Yang Chendong's approval, Yang Chendong was happy and naturally wanted to express something. He immediately took out a set of L'Oreal women's cosmetics and placed it on the table. He did not know why such women's products would appear in the warehouse. Perhaps it was to serve the families of some officers. However, since he had discovered it, he naturally wanted to use it to the best of his ability. Li Daotong's eyes lit up when he saw the set of exquisite white boxes in front of him. As the local magistrate, he knew that Yang Chendong's item would not be simple. He asked excitedly, "Magistrate Yang, may I know what this is?" Replying to official Li, "This item is called cosmetics. When used on a woman's body, it has the effect of preserving her youth. In the past, I had people send 2 sets to the current emperor. This is the 3rd set." Yang Chendong smiled as he explained the use and origin of this item. Li Daotong immediately became excited when he heard that this was the 3rd set in addition to the emperor's 2 sets. Coincidentally, Magistrate Li attached great importance to relationships, especially to his wife who had gone through hardships with him. It was a pity that she was getting older, so it was inevitable that her beauty would be greatly reduced. With this set of products, it could not be said to solve the real problem, but it could be said to be a testimony of one's heart. When he thought about how no one other than the emperor had used this item, he felt even more grateful. In his excitement and happiness, Li Daotong changed the way he addressed him. Chendong, I've troubled you. Why don't we have lunch here? How could he refuse a superior's invitation? Young Chendong smiled and nodded in agreement. At the same time, he motioned to Tiger's Mane, who was standing to the side. Immediately, he placed some MSG cooking wine and other things that could not be bought with money on the table. Li Daotong had eaten at the Four Seas restaurant before. With his status, when he asked why the food was so delicious, Yang Fu naturally did not hide it. Therefore, he knew the effects of this item, but it was not good to directly ask the Yang family for it. Now that Yang Chendong had taken the initiative to take out these things, he felt that the other party was too good at dealing with people. He was not inferior to his father at all. For a moment, Li Daotong could not help but become cautious and even nervous when he spoke, as if he was afraid of saying something wrong. On the other hand, Yang Chendong smiled when he should and spoke when he should. He did not seem to be reserved at all. As the saying goes, when one is courteous to others, one must have a request. When one person asked for another person's help, it was inevitable that they would be in a disadvantageous position first. Naturally, they would not be able to speak even if they wanted to. However, Yang Chendong did not want to take advantage of Li Daotong's interest. Even if he did not come today, with the name of Dingyu at home, no one could do anything about it. Since he was so calm, it was natural when they got along, and he even had the intention of gaining the upper hand. This scene was seen by Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the others who were standing at the side. Everyone was amazed. They admired the sixth young master's calmness and nonchalance. Yang Chendong had an official position, and since then he acted more freely. The people of the Yang family's old mansion also felt proud of him. When they walked out on the street, their chests were raised a little. From Magistrate Li's mansion to the Yang family's old mansion, Yang Chendong continued to keep a low profile. Even when guests came, he recommended them on the grounds that he was not feeling well. However, only the old butler Yang Hai, Xiao Yin, and a few other people who were familiar with him knew that the sixth young master was not in the old mansion at all, but had left. As for where he went, they would never ask. In their eyes, the sixth young master was a person who did great things. Everything he did was not something they could explain. At the Black Wharf by the Sea of Fuzhou, Yang Chendong had not appeared here for more than half a year since the last time he left. As soon as he appeared this time, he felt that someone was spying on him from 10 miles away. Then, as expected, someone came out from the dark. There were even 2 people hiding by the sand, using the camouflage there. Even if they were 5 steps away, it would be difficult to discover them. Hello, young master. There were a total of 8 soldiers in charge of security, and 3 of them were members of the Cold Front that he had personally trained. Yes, you have to be vigilant at all times. You have to know that once the enemy appears, they will never notify you in advance. Yang Chendong smiled and nodded. He knew that under normal circumstances, there were 10 guards in a squad. Only 8 people appeared here, which meant that there were 2 people hiding in the dark and did not take the initiative to come out to greet him. Logically speaking, being able to meet the 6th young master was an opportunity to show their faces, but they would rather give up such an opportunity and still carry out the task of being on guard. This alone was enough to make Yang Chendong feel gratified. Each of you will be rewarded with 5 taels of silver, and the other 2 brothers will be rewarded with 10 taels of silver each. Generous rewards and fair punishments were always an important way to capture people's hearts. Now that Yang Chendong was not short of money, he naturally did not hesitate to spend it. Thank you, young master. Thump, thump, thump. The 8 guards were all delighted. This was a reward from the 6th young master, and it was enough for them to brag for a while. Well, this is what you deserve. Continue with your mission. Yang Chendong waved his hand and smiled as he led Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Yang Si to the Black Wharf. Yang San stayed in Jianing Prefecture to set up the security bureau. while Yang Wu and Yang Lu were responsible for the safety of the Yang family. Under the division of labor, Yang Qindong only appeared a few hundred miles away with the three of them. But even so, if anyone had any ideas about the sixth young master, they would be making a big mistake. With the large warehouse and advanced weapons in hand, no matter how many people came, they would not be able to do anything to them. It was not an exaggeration to describe the Black Wharf as the speed of Shenzhen's reform and opening up 8 years ago. It had only been half a year, but several factories had already been built. Among them was the arsenal. At present, they could only make bows and crossbows, but with Gao Xiong's continuous supply of iron and copper from the sea, with no shortage of resources, innovation was only a matter of time. The person in charge, Wu Gang, was one of the old people. Cement factory. With a lot of knowledge provided by Yang Qindong, the first batch of cement had already appeared and passed the inspection. Now more students were being trained to ensure that once a new base was established, a large number of people who knew about cement could immediately use it. The person in charge of this was a person called Jing Guang, who was originally recruited by the old butler, Yang Hai, when he went to the Ministry of Works in the capital. Yang Rong was the Minister of Works for a long time, so he still had the ability to hire a few idle people in the ministry. Chapter 28. Furniture Factory. Its main purpose was to build some furniture and the layout of the soldier training factory. Things like sofas, work tables, and even the construction of carriages were all within its scope. Right now, there was no rubber or suitable materials to make tires. Otherwise, Yang Qindong would have wanted to make some new carriages. To be honest, every time he came to the Black Dock, it was bad luck. The bumpiness was really unbearable. For this reason, Yang Qindong even had the idea of taking out a military vehicle from the warehouse. However, he felt that it was still too shocking and had to suppress this idea. However, he had already decided that this time, when he came to the Black Dock, he would arrange for Gao Xiong to send people to the west to search for rubber trees, especially in the American region. Then he would bring back the whole tree. One day, he would be the first person to make soft tires. The furniture factory was more complicated. The person in charge was also the old craftsman, Li Xuanfu. This person was very meticulous and made Yang Qindong feel more at ease. Power plant. Just by hearing the name, one would know its purpose. However, at that time, no one could understand. Even the person in charge, Yuan Qi, was very puzzled. Yuan Qi was a craftsman from the Ministry of Works. It was said that he was very smart. When he was very young, he knew how to make many novel and strange things. However, because he was born as a craftsman, his life was naturally not rich. He found a wife, Zhou Hua, who was very good at giving birth. She actually gave birth to 7 children in a few years, living up to his name. With more mouths to feed, Yuan Qi naturally could not take care of everything. It was at this time that Yang Hai went to the Ministry of Works and found out about Yuan Qi's situation. He remembered that the 6th young master had once said that as long as someone was capable, he would not lack money and food. As such, he brought him over. In order to have enough to eat, Yuan Qi brought his wife and children from the capital to Fujian. However, before they reached Jianing, they were picked up by people from Lungfeng. When they arrived, not only did Yuan Qi become a research worker, but his wife, Zhou Hua, also showed enough ability. She was very skillful with her hands. The clothes she made were good, fast, and neat. However, this was not the main point. Yuan Qi obtained a book on the principles of sewing machine manufacturing written by the 6th young master. It was written on a method to use machine to sew clothes. The main components of the machine, the machine base, the needle, the shuttle, and the oil bottle could be made one by one. One could imagine that if it was successful, it would greatly increase the speed of making clothes. It was definitely a great undertaking. When Zhou Hua heard the news, she urged her husband to build such a machine every day. As a skilled embroidery worker, she was too aware of their fate. Many people's eyes were damaged when they were young, so they were useless when they were old. When they arrived at the illegal docks, their meals and drinks were naturally arranged. Yuan Qi was very happy to be able to enter a special research area. Especially when he heard that the sewing machine manufacturing principles were written by the sixth young master himself, he admired it even more. It was difficult to call him, who was originally in a state of research. Not to mention thunder, even if it was a knife, he would not be distracted at all. This was the spirit that a research worker should have. But this time, when he heard someone outside shouting that the young Master Qi was here, he put down all the work in his hands and ran out. Like Luan Qi, all the people at the illegal docks were also like him. Some of them came first, and some came later. But no matter what, they did not have to worry about food and drink now. All of this was brought to them by the sixth young master. They knew how to be grateful. Spontaneously coming out to greet him was a show of their attitude. When Luan Qi came out of his research room, he saw that Yang Chendong was already surrounded by a group of people. Many of these people had never seen the sixth young master before, but they had been hearing legends about this young master ever since they came here. In their imagination, this person must be tall and powerful, and it was even possible that he had 3 heads and 6 arms. When they surrounded him, it was more of a novelty. However, with so many people suddenly surrounding him, it was difficult to guarantee his safety. Not only Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, Yang Si, but even Lung Song and Gao Xiong rushed over with the members of the Cold Front to maintain order. In response, Yang Chendong waved his hand and refused. These people trusted him so much, but they could not trust him completely. Who else in the world could be trusted? It's okay. Let them come over and take a look. I also want to talk to them. Yang Chendong acted as if nothing would happen. He picked up a cute little girl who was dressed neatly and had bright eyes. He took out a piece of chewing gum and handed it to her. Big brother, how do you eat this? Do you put it in your mouth? The little girl did not seem to be very afraid of people. She was still smiling when Yang Chendong carried her in his arms. Yes, this thing is called chewing gum. It can keep your breath fresh. You have to put it in your mouth, but you can only chew it. Once it becomes tasteless, you have to spit it out. You can't eat it. Oh, by the way, it can also blow bubbles. As Yang Chendong spoke, he put the same piece of chewing gum in his mouth and began to chew it. Little girl, what's your name? Seeing Yang Chendong take the lead and put the chewing gum in his mouth, the little girl was no longer afraid. She also opened the packaging of the gum in her hand and chewed it. As she ate, she said with a smile, "It's so sweet. Big brother, my name is Xiaoyu. My parents said that on the day I was born, it was drizzling for a whole day." Xiaoyu, what a good name. When he said this, Yang Chendong slowly blew a white bubble in his mouth. Ah. Seeing this scene that she had never seen before, Xiaoyu was shocked. Her big eyes were filled with a why. Look. Fortunately, she was smart enough and quickly began to learn how to blow bubbles. However, this kind of thing requires skill. It is not something that can be learned by a first-timer. In addition, chewing gum is not like bubble gum. There is a certain degree of difficulty in blowing bubbles. It is even more impossible to learn immediately. After Yang Chendong ate a piece of candy, white bubbles came out of his mouth, causing the other children to be surprised and envious. Some of the bolder children also tried to reach out to Yang Chendong, wanting a piece of candy that could blow bubbles. Yang Chendong, who had prepared a lot, naturally did not refuse. With the mentality of not worrying about scarcity, but worrying about uneven distribution, he gave a piece to all the children who came to ask for it. The children were happy, but some of the adults were panicking, especially Xiaoyu's mother. She walked over in a panic, bowed, and then said with an apologetic face, "Sixth young master, Xiaoyu is not sensible and asked for things from you. Please forgive her." Looking at the somewhat beautiful middle-aged woman who was neatly dressed, Yang Chendong's face was filled with kindness. "You are Xiaoyu's mother?" This time, without waiting for the woman to answer, Gao Xiong introduced her first, reporting to young master, "This woman is Xiaoyu's mother. Her name is Zhou Hua, and she is the wife of the person in charge of the power plant, Luan Qi. At the same time, she is very skillful. We were just about to report to you and ask you to approve her as the manager of the garment factory." Luan Qi? I've heard of this person. Yang Chendong nodded. Long before he came, he had read some information about the illegal docks. Luan Qi was a person with ideas, strong skills, and was regarded as the smartest person. Naturally, his name had long been in his mind. Zhou Hua was originally a little helpless, afraid that her little daughter would do something wrong and offend the sixth young master. Now that she heard that he already knew her husband's name, she immediately felt honored and her expression became much better. Okay, I'll leave the child to you. Tell your husband that I want to have a good chat with him later, Yang Chendong said politely, and at the same time he handed Xiaoyu, who was leaning on his arms, back to Zhou Hua. He had always valued talents. If possible, he did not mind telling Wan Qi what he knew, hoping that he could really create electricity. In that case, countless people would benefit from it, and it would also greatly promote the development of science. Zhou Hua had always been a carefree person. Even in the face of strangers, she would not feel afraid. However, she did not know why, but when facing the amiable Yang Chendong, she sweated all over. That was a manifestation of nervousness. Perhaps this was a kind of attitude and respect towards people who were important. The children received the chewing gum and ran away with smiles. Some adults also saw Yang Chendong's true appearance and left with satisfaction. With fewer people around, Yang Chendong walked towards the military camp in the distance, accompanied by Lung Song and Gao Xiong. According to Yang Chendong's idea, the military camp was built very neatly. It was a straight line, giving off a very orderly feeling. Yang Chendong watched the training of the Lung Feng soldiers here. Over the past half a year, the older Lung Feng soldiers had already taken in disciples. Mixing the old and the new was indeed an effective way to increase their combat strength. In addition, after Gao Xiong obtained the new cannons, every time he went out to sea, he would come back victorious. Not only did he bring back unlimited wealth, he also brought back a lot of strong laborers. Among them, there were some good seedlings. After a strict selection process, they became auxiliary soldiers. The so-called auxiliary soldiers were a battle sequence given by Yang Chendong. He also called these people the reserve soldiers. It referred to those soldiers who were undergoing training, but had not passed the various tests. In the future, once an auxiliary soldier passed the test and reached the standard, he would immediately become a new Lung Feng soldier. The direct benefit was that his monthly salary would increase. The 1 silver tael per month when he was an auxiliary soldier would become 2 silver taels. Of course, this was not the most important thing. After becoming a Lung Feng soldier, it meant that he was a qualified soldier and would be given a 81 rifle. That was the symbol of glory. For the sake of safety, they usually did not carry bullets in their guns. They would only carry bullets when they were shooting targets or when they needed to go out on missions. However, this still made some people wild with joy. Every new member of Cold Front carried a gun and walked around the dark dock. It was not only to show off, but also to show off. Chapter 29. Lung Song and Gao Xiong didn't stop them. In their eyes, this was an honorable display of status, and also a way to increase their sense of responsibility. These people's showing off could indeed boost the morale of the training, and ensure that more qualified men would sign up for the army. However, Lung Feng's assessment was too strict. After half a year, the number of auxiliary soldiers had already reached more than 1,000, but only about 100 of them were qualified to carry guns. Yang Chendong stood there in high spirits as he listened to Lung Song and Gao Xiong's report. Especially Lung Song, because most of the candidates were plundered from the sea. He wanted to develop the army, but every time he wanted a good seedling, he had to argue with Gao Xiong many times before he could get his wish. As a result, the army only had a platoon of 30 people. This was far from enough to meet his requirements, and he couldn't lead these people to achieve any glorious results. Yang Chendong lightly shook his head at Lung Song's anxiousness. You can't eat a fat man in one bite. These people were born poor. They didn't even have enough to eat before, so their physical strength couldn't keep up. If they wanted to reach the standard during training, it would naturally take a lot of effort. It doesn't matter if they don't have to. Now that they can eat their fill, their physical fitness will definitely improve slowly. When the time comes, more and more people will pass the assessment, and both the Navy and Army will have the opportunity to grow stronger. Haste makes waste. It was unrealistic to expect a person who hadn't eaten their fill for more than a decade to completely recover their body in a short period of time. Yang Chendong had just finished speaking when one of the instructors, Yang, agreed. Yes, young master is right. These soldiers' physical fitness is really too weak, and it will take some time for them to recover their bodies. We will pay more attention to the distribution of food in the future, so that they can recover as soon as possible and pass the assessment. Yang observed Yang Chendong attentively, and noticed that Yang Chendong was listening attentively. He even nodded from time to time to express his agreement. He then probed. It's just that their bodies are easy to recover with enough food and meat. However, when it comes to cultural classes, most of them are illiterate. It's a little troublesome to teach them. Can't you be a little more lenient in this aspect? Oh, have you already done that? Yang Chendong, who still had a smile on his face, suddenly turned cold. There was a 180-degree change in his expression as he stared fiercely at Yang. This glance made the courageous Yang fall to his knees with a thud. At this moment, he was already sweating profusely. He felt as if he was being stared at by a ferocious tiger. It was very likely that he would be swallowed whole in the next second. No. To repay the young master, this is just an idea that we instructors have. We haven't implemented it yet. Yang explained in a weak voice. In just a short while his clothes were soaked in sweat. It's best if you don't. Let me tell you, you can't relax during cultural classes. There were other trainings and assessments that could not be relaxed either. Remember, they will have to go to the battlefield in the end. They will be risking their lives. If they are not strong enough, sending them to the battlefield is equivalent to sending them to their deaths. When I was training you in the past, the young master said that you should sweat more when you train and bleed less when you fight. I hope that this is not just a slogan, but something that you can completely remember in your hearts. If anyone can't do this, then leave as soon as possible. I don't keep idle people here. Yang Chendong was really a little angry. There were only so many people, yet there were already people who ignored his words. The direct result of this was that the morale of the army would be slackened, and even internal strife would be possible. Soldiers were originally hot-blooded and liked to do things straightforwardly. It was difficult for them to consider the feelings of others. This kind of army was of course a fierce army, but it was also a double-edged sword. If it was not used well, it was afraid that one day it would hurt oneself. This was something that Yang Chendong absolutely did not want to see. They had enough firearms. Once the muzzles were pointed at him, what kind of consequences would there be? Even if he had a bulletproof vest, he would not be able to withstand it. At this moment, or rather after this incident, Yang Chendong suddenly had an idea in his mind. That was, he had to create a group of sufficiently obedient political instructors, which were the necessary company-level instructors, battalion-level instructors, and regiment-level political commissars. This was not because he wanted to divide power, but because he had to ensure the obedience of the army. Otherwise, even if there were no problems now, there would be a day when it would explode. Then it would really be a fatal existence. Yang Chendong did not want to come to the great Ming Dynasty only to be killed by his own people in the end. That would be a grievance that could not be redressed. Yang Chendong's angry rebuke made Yang nod his head repeatedly. Even Lung Song and Gao Xiong on the side were sweating. Before this, they did have the idea of lowering the cultural assessment. In the end, it was because of the lack of soldiers and the lack of knowledge. There were always some seedlings who were physically qualified, but because they were unwilling to learn, they did not pass the assessment in the end. If this was only an example, it would be fine. However, it had gradually become a trend, and the fresh blood in the cold front was getting fewer and fewer. In view of this situation, Lung Song and Gao Xiong discussed with Yang and the other 4 instructors whether they could lower the standards of the cultural assessment. This way, they would be able to obtain more soldiers. In fact, Lung Song and Gao Xiong did not pay enough attention to the importance of the cultural assessment. They even thought that, during war, as long as one had enough military training and had such advanced weapons, one would definitely be able to win the battle. It was enough to know how to read. What was the use of learning so deeply? It was precisely because of this understanding that He Yang and the other 4 instructors had changed their minds. Just now they were just testing the waters. They never thought that it would cause the 6th young master to be so angry. This was something they did not expect. He even said that this was not a place for idlers. After seeing the advanced weapons, especially the various skills taught by Yang Qindong, everyone deeply understood how powerful this place was. It was not an exaggeration to say that if the 6th young master had any disloyalty, it would greatly shake the ruling regime of the Ming Dynasty. This was a new and powerful force. As the earliest participants, one could imagine what kind of glory it would create in the future. If anyone were to leave now, that person would be a real fool. Therefore, with just one sentence, everyone tactfully shut their mouths. Perhaps they had their own selfish motives, but no matter what, they would not leave. Forget it. Yang Qindong saw everyone's reaction. He really wanted to say more. For example, if they had knowledge, they would be able to use their knowledge to be useful to the country and society in the future. Even if one day they were old or injured and had to leave the ranks of the military, they would have the ability to survive wherever they went. However, he also knew that it was a little too early to say these things to these people. Rather than trying to reason with them here, it was better to let them understand on their own. It did not matter if they did not understand. In the future, there would be more political instructors here. The ideological work would be left to them. As for these people, it would be best if they could adapt. If they could not, then they could only be eliminated. This was also the unchanging law of the jungle under the advancement of society. Fortunately, they were all cultured people. Even if they did not have the job in front of them, they could still do many other things. They would not face the predicament of having nothing to do. Take me to see the arsenal. Yang Qindong did not have the interest to continue talking with He Yang and the others. He turned around and left. Lung Song and Gao Xiong quickly led him. Tiger's mane originally did not leave Yang Qindong's side, but at this moment he stopped and glared fiercely at He Yang and the 5 instructors. These people used to be the young master's subordinates, and they graduated with excellent results. But now, they actually dared to disobey the young master's orders. Just based on this, he could take out his gun and execute them on the spot. However, Tiger's mane did not do so in the end. He had heard the young master say more than once that people would make mistakes, so they should be given a chance to correct themselves. He did not know whether the young master's kindness was good or bad, so he could not deal with this matter in private. However, he could not avoid using his eyes to warn them. He only coldly stared at them. When he saw the 5 of them lower their heads, he turned around and left. From beginning to end, he did not say a word. However, the more he was like this, the more pressure the 5 of them felt. At this moment, they finally faced the seriousness of the problem. They also understood that once the young master gave up on them, they would completely lose the life in front of them. It would be a feeling worse than death. Make it up immediately. He Yang was quite decisive in his actions. One of the instructors, Song Desheng, immediately supported him and said, "That's right. We will immediately reiterate our request. Those who do not pass the cultural test will definitely not become a real cold vanguard, no matter how good their performance is, or how outstanding their training results are." The 5 instructors quickly reached an agreement. After that, this order was announced while Yang Qindong was still inspecting the munitions factory. After receiving the news, Tiger's mane walked to Yang Qindong's side and reported softly, "Young master, He Yang and the others have reiterated the importance of cultural studies. They are announcing it in the barracks right now." He only nodded. Yang Qindong could tolerate people making mistakes, and he would also give them a chance to correct their mistakes. However, this matter had already sounded the alarm for him. When he returned, he would have to consider grooming political instructors. This was already urgent. Chapter 30. Yang Qindong just nodded to show that he knew about it. Then he continued to talk to Wu Gang, the person in charge of the munitions factory. Now there are more and more people in the army, and the number of target practice is more and more frequent. Therefore, we need more and more ammunition. You can't just make bows and crossbows, because there will be fewer and fewer opportunities to use them in the future. It's time to shift your focus. Yes. Wu Gang nodded respectfully and replied, last time, young master told me about the process of making bullets. I also took some people to do experiments. I believe that soon, we can make our own bullets. But the shells still need some time. Very good. That's the way to do work. You need to be proactive. Don't wait until the last moment to remember what to do. Yang Chendong expressed his appreciation for Wu Gang's attitude and work progress. Finally, he asked with concern, how is it? Is the gunpowder sufficient? It should be enough for now. Captain Gao Xiong met a fleet of gunpowder at sea last time, and they sent it to me. But the quality of the gunpowder is not very good. So it needs to be purified. For this reason, we have decided to find the raw materials to develop the gunpowder ourselves. In this way, the guarantee rate will be higher. Good. Wu Gang's answer and preparation made Yang Chendong very satisfied. Immediately, he expressed his approval for their work. At the same time, he ordered that all the staff of the munitions factory would be rewarded with 2 taels of silver. For those who worked actively and made outstanding contributions, the rewards would be doubled. He also said that whoever produced the first batch of ammunition would be rewarded with 100 taels of silver for each worker who participated in the improvement. After inspecting the munitions factory, Yang Chendong went to the furniture factory and met Li Xuanfu, the person in charge here. Li Xuanfu made a lot of money for Yang Chendong when he made the toilet, so Yang Chendong knew him very well. During the conversation, he not only affirmed the work of Li Xuanfu and others, but also expressed his expectations for their work. That was, they should continue to work hard and make more furniture of better quality for people to use. In the cement factory, he met the person in charge, Jing Guang. As for the function of cement, Yang Chendong knew it very well. While encouraging and affirming their work, he also said that once they had a new base, they would need a large amount of cement. At that time, whether it was the construction of the spacious cement road, or the construction of the barracks and residences, they would all be of use. He could not afford to neglect the proper business. Jing Guang was a man who didn't like to talk too much. All he did was guarantee that he would produce more backup cement to ensure that they wouldn't screw up when needed. From noon to afternoon, Yang Chendong went to many places and gave very pertinent opinions on some of the things he saw. After having dinner with Lung Song, Gao Xiong, and the others in the barracks, he strolled to Luan Qi's house. During the day, Yang Chendong went to a few factories, but he didn't go to the power plant. This made Luan Qi very nervous. Even during dinner, she was absent-minded and didn't eat much. That's enough. What are you worried about? I said that you would be in charge of the power plant, but who knows what it is? Even you don't know much about it. Since you haven't made any achievements, do you still want the 6th young master to come to your place for inspection? What would he come to see? Zhou Hua was lively and loud. Seeing her husband's absent-minded appearance, she scolded him angrily. Luan Qi was already in a bad mood. Naturally, she didn't want to quarrel with Zhou Hua. She just sat there silently. Her youngest daughter, Xiao Yu, saw this and walked over with small steps. Daddy, don't be angry with mommy. Actually, the 6th young master is very nice. He hugged me during the day and gave me candy that can blow bubbles. As she spoke, Xiao Yu carefully raised a piece of colorless chewing gum that was wrapped in a piece of cloth high up in the air. The chewing gum no longer had the taste of sugar and couldn't blow bubbles. However, Xiao Yu still couldn't bear to throw it away. She carefully kept it. Xiao Yu, be good. Daddy isn't angry. Luan Qi naturally wouldn't tell her the worries in his heart. He had always been the smartest in the eyes of others. Of course, he didn't want to admit that he didn't know what electricity was. Although he had read books and had some theoretical understanding, he had never seen the real thing. He still couldn't imagine what electricity was. Why did it say that it could emit light and heat? It didn't seem to make sense at all. Wouldn't it have the same effect as the sun? It was too unbelievable. It was too difficult for him to do something that even he couldn't understand. Luan Qi had his own thoughts. Xiao Yu couldn't tell at all. She just stared at the colorless chewing gum in her hand in a daze. Only one piece was too little. She wanted to have a lot. Then she could also blow bubbles like the 6th young master. Then in front of her friends she would be so glorious. Ah! Sixth young master, why are you here? Zhou Hua's anxious voice suddenly sounded from outside the door. There was even a hint of fear in her voice. What? You have some kind of monster here that eats people. Can't I come? Yang Chendong's kind voice sounded. Then the door curtain was pulled open. The sixth young master, who was dressed in camouflage, strode in. The sky was already dark. There was only a kerosene lamp in the room, so it was still a little dim. When Yang Chendong stepped in, Wan Qi didn't recognize him at all. However, Xiao Yu, who was in his arms, had good eyes. She recognized Yang Chendong at a glance. Suddenly, she jumped out of her father's arms happily and jogged to greet him. Yang Chendong was very cooperative as he bent down to take Xiao Yu over and carried her up in his arms. Xiao Yu seemed to be naturally close to Yang Chendong. She wasn't afraid at all. Instead, she wrapped her arms around his neck and giggled. Big brother, do you still have chewing gum? Xiao Yu is useless. I blew it for the whole afternoon but didn't blow a single bubble. You said before that I can't keep it in my mouth if it doesn't have any fragrance. I had no choice but to spit it out. As she spoke, Xiao Yu felt wronged. In the end, she was about to cry. In both Yang Chendong's previous life and this life, he was most afraid of women crying. Although Xiao Yu was not yet 10 years old, once she cried, it didn't matter her age. Okay, Xiao Yu, don't cry. Big brother still has some chewing gum. I'll give it to you, okay? After speaking, Yang Chendong took out a whole box of chewing gum from the pocket of his camouflage uniform like magic. There were a total of 100 pieces inside. This was what he wanted to give to Xiao Yu. Suddenly, there was so much chewing gum in her hand. At that moment, Xiao Yu's face was like the sky after the rain. She didn't look like she was going to cry. Instead, she looked happy. Then, she couldn't help but kiss Yang Chendong's face. Then she giggled and said, Big brother is so nice. Xiao Yu likes you. Haha, I like Xiao Yu too. Yang Chendong laughed happily in a good mood. His mental age was already over 40. A girl who was less than 10 years old was indeed a child in his eyes. However, he forgot that he was only 16 years old. At that moment, Zhou Hua was standing behind Yang Chendong. When she saw that her daughter and the sixth young master hit it off so well, and that the two of them even said that they liked each other, she couldn't help but be overjoyed. When she saw that her husband, Wan Qi, was still stunned and couldn't recognize Yang Chendong's identity, she couldn't help but walk forward angrily and kick him lightly. Idiot, hurry up and recognize him. This is the sixth young master. Ah. When he heard that the person who came was the sixth young master, Wan Qi was also stunned. During the day, he only saw him from afar. In addition, he wasn't wearing a camouflage uniform at that time. The light in the room was dim, so naturally he couldn't recognize him. Now that he knew his identity, of course, he had a terrified expression on his face. After staying at the illegal docks for a long time, there was no one who hadn't heard of the sixth young master's name. Wan Qi was also influenced by him, and had always been looking forward to it. Now that he finally saw the real person, he was naturally very happy. However, he didn't like to socialize. Other than standing there and smiling foolishly, he really didn't know what to do. Yang Chendong was more proactive. He first sent Xiao Yu into Zhou Hua's arms. Then he looked at the reserved Wan Qi and said, What's wrong? Mr. Luan, I'm at your house. Aren't you going to invite me to sit down? Oh, sixth young master, please sit down, please sit down. Wan Qi suddenly realized at this time. He quickly retreated and found a chair for Yang Chendong to sit down. After taking the chair, Yang Chendong first casually looked around the room. Although the area wasn't very big, it was clean. He couldn't help but nod his head in satisfaction. Sixth young master, my house is really too simple and crude. Wan Qi noticed Yang Chendong's expression and said with an embarrassed face. It's pretty good. Although the room isn't big, it's really neat and clean. It's just that the light is a little too dim. Yang Chendong seemed to have inadvertently found a problem. Then he shouted outside. Bring the things in? Yes. The voices of Tiger's Mane and the others sounded outside the door. Then 2 things that looked like black planks and another thing that others couldn't name were carried into the room. Put them on the ground. When Yang Chendong saw that the things were ready, he stood up with a smile on his face. Then his pair of nimble hands constantly fiddled with the things that were carried into the room, one by one. From beginning to end, it only took 1 or 2 minutes. Finally, he took out a transparent glass ball and placed it on a place in the room with a hook. After checking the wires and confirming that there were no problems with all the wires, Yang Chendong raised his head and looked at the puzzled faces of Wan Qi, Zhou Hua, Xiao Yu, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Yang Si. He said, "Are you guys ready? It's time to witness a miracle." Chapter 31. Of course, none of the people present knew this famous line. Everyone still looked at Yang Chendong with a puzzled expression. Until now, they still couldn't figure out what the sixth young master was doing. What would these things do if they were brought into the house? Yang Chendong saw everyone's puzzled expression. He knew that the foreplay was in vain, but it didn't matter. He was looking forward to seeing everyone's reaction when the electricity was turned on. However, in order to avoid any accidents, he reminded them in a friendly manner. No matter what happens later, don't move around. Even if you fall, sit on the spot. Don't touch anyone else. It'll be bad if you get hurt. What does that mean, sixth young master? Zhou Hua was so curious that she couldn't help but ask. Just listen to the sixth young master. Seeing that Tiger's Mane and the other two didn't have any doubts, and only his wife was still asking questions, Wan Qi reminded them. It's nothing. In short, no matter what happens later, don't panic and don't move around casually. Yang Chendong knew that no matter how much he said, it wouldn't be as surprising as seeing it with their own eyes. Therefore, after laughing, he connected the last wire to the battery holder. When he did this, Zhou Hua was still puzzled. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "Sixth young master, why are you standing on the spot and not moving around?" Before Zhou Hua could finish her sentence, she couldn't help but scream first. Then it was Xiao Yu, Luan Qi, and Tiger's Mane and the other two who couldn't help but scream. Outside Luan Qi's house, there were 10 soldiers sent to protect the sixth young master. Although this was an illegal dock, it was supposed to be safe. However, the sixth young master's safety couldn't be compromised. Therefore, after a discussion between Lung Song and Gao Xiong, they decided to send 10 soldiers, led by Tung Shan. All of a sudden, a series of screams rang out from inside, giving them a fright. However, what made the 10 of them even more puzzled was that they were originally hidden in the dark, but now, their figures were revealed by the bright lights in the room. None of their concealment was effective anymore. "What's going on? Let's go in and take a look." Tung Shan reacted quickly. At first, his eyes lit up as if it was daytime, but after 2 seconds, he reacted and wanted to go into the house to check on the sixth young master's safety. Fortunately, Yang Chendong's voice came from the room. "I'm fine. You guys can stay outside." Was there really nothing wrong with the room? Of course, that was impossible, because at this moment, everyone in the room had their mouths and eyes wide open, as if they had seen a ghost. The lights were on, and the solar generator was working. The 2 solar panels were connected to a large battery, and the voltage was enough to illuminate the central room, which was only a dozen square meters, as if it was daytime. The light that suddenly lit up was so dazzling and unbelievable to everyone. Fortunately, Yang Chendong had warned them beforehand, so no one ran away instinctively. However, the disappointing Zhou Hua still fell to the ground with her daughter in her arms. Tiger's Mane and the others did not fare any better. Although they did not move around, they were still flustered at that moment, and did not know what to do. On the other hand, Wan Qi was first shocked by the white light in front of him, and sat on the stool. However, when he came to his senses, his eyes lit up and he asked excitedly with a slightly hoarse voice, Is this electricity?" "Yes, this is electricity." Yang Chendong gave a very accurate answer. Based on the theory that seeing was believing, Yang Chendong arranged for Tiger's Mane and the others to put the 2 solar panels under the sun to absorb the light. The reason why he chose to come to Luan Qi's house at night was to give him a deeper impression. Now, it seemed that the effect was quite good. "Is this electricity? It really can emit light and heat." After Luanqi knew that this was the effect of electricity, he was the first to calm down. He got up and walked to the light bulb, then gently reached out his hand and felt the heat coming from it. Yes, electricity itself has the effect of emitting light and heat. If we use it well, then in the future, every house can be as bright as day at night. At that time, men won't have to worry about hurting their eyes when they study, women won't have to worry about hurting their eyes when they sew, and even children won't have to worry about bumping into things when they play. Yang Chendong was talking about the benefits of electricity to people in this era. Luanqi listened attentively, and his mind was constantly looking forward to it. It was as if he could already see how it would look like when electricity was everywhere and brought benefits to people. Luanqi was not the only one. Even Hu Meng and the others felt their hearts surge with shock. Their young master was too amazing. Not only did he have those powerful firearms, but he could also write exciting stories that made people not want to sleep and only wanted to read the next chapter. Now he could even come up with something that could emit light and heat. Could it be that the young master was the reincarnation of a deity? Otherwise, how could he have these spells and abilities? In terms of calmness, Xiaoyu was probably the calmest in the entire house. After all, she was a child. When faced with something new, she was the fastest to calm down after being surprised. Her beautiful big eyes fell on everyone one by one. When she saw that everyone was looking at Yang Chendong with reverence and even worship, she was very happy in her heart because she knew that her big brother would always be the most powerful person. Time passed slowly. Slowly, the people in the house got used to it. Luanqi took out a pen and paper excitedly. He had never seen electricity before. Although Yang Chendong said that it was lively in the book that he had read, seeing it was better than hearing about it 100 times. Now that he had seen it for himself, he knew that the book was not exaggerating at all. This electricity was indeed very powerful and very good. Since the sixth young master could bring electricity, he must be very familiar with it. If he still did not know that he should take the opportunity to ask for advice, then he was really a blockhead. This time he came with the intention of dispelling his doubts. Yang Chendong had already prepared himself for Luanqi's questions. For this reason, he had also learned some knowledge about electricity. Of course, that was only the most basic knowledge. For example, electric current was divided into direct current and alternating current. Electric wires were divided into fire wires and spirit wires, etc. However, these things that seemed simple in the future still brought great shock to Luanqi. Combined with some of the things recorded in the book, he finally had a preliminary understanding of this new thing. Luanqi, there are many ways to generate electricity. For example, coal can generate electricity, wind can generate electricity, light can generate electricity, water can generate electricity, etc. These require you to experiment step by step. This requires a long process of understanding. You can't rush it. Of course, you can tell me what you need. This young master will do his best to satisfy you. I just hope that in your hands, electricity can be owned by people as soon as possible. It can serve mankind and benefit mankind. Yes, I will work hard to learn and do it with my heart. Luanqi saw electricity for the first time. It was the first time that he had a certain understanding of it. At this moment, his heart could no longer be calm. He even hoped that he could have the ability to not be tired and not sleep. That way, he could study electricity earlier. I believe you can do it. He patted Luanqi's shoulder. How about this? In the future, you will be the factory director of the power plant. Oh right, I also heard that you are developing a machine to make clothes. Very good, you can tell me anything you need. When I am not around, you can also look for Lung Song or Gao Xiong. They will unconditionally satisfy you. As for the future factory director, I think it will be better for your wife to be the one. Zhou Hua, who was standing on the side, didn't expect the sixth young master to talk about her. He even said that he wanted her to be the factory director, although she didn't know what the factory director would do. But thinking about it, it should be an official. Thinking that an illiterate woman like her could be an official, Zhou Hua instinctively wanted to decline. Seeing that Zhou Hua wanted to speak, Yang Chendong laughed and said, "Well, you don't have to refuse. I am not giving face to anyone. I know that you are skillful and have the ability to do so. Of course, it is not so easy to be an official." With a smile, Yang Chendong reached into his arms and took out a few drawings. He handed them to Zhou Hua and said, "These are the drawings of some clothes. You can study them carefully. If there is anything you don't understand, you can find me at any time while I am here." Those were some sample drawings of military uniforms, as well as women's bras, underwear, and cheongsams. Most of the clothes of the Ming Dynasty were long gowns and robes, which didn't look capable at all. Most of the clothes of the army were two-person battle jackets, which looked loose and not capable at all. It was far less practical than camouflage clothes. Although there were a lot of military uniforms in the warehouse, after all, the more they took out, the less there would be. For such a large number of consumables, of course, it was necessary to prepare for a rainy day. Yang Chendong knew that if these things were done well, not only would it be beneficial to him, but it could also be sold in large quantities and eventually become a very profitable industry. For this, he also arranged for people to buy a lot of cloth and silk. As for manpower, there were many men and women in the illegal docks. They could be used. It was equivalent to finding a job to better stabilize people's hearts. Electricity appeared. Just after Yang Chendong left, the illegal docks were so restless that night. People came to Luan Chi's house in groups just to see this treasure, that could be as bright as day. Unfortunately, they could only see it from afar and not up close because Luan Chi protected these things as if they were his life. Even Gao Xiong and Lung Song could only stand outside the house, and didn't have the opportunity to enter the house to see. Xiao Yu, on the other hand, took this opportunity to show off. Her little friends were all gathered in front of her house, looking enviously at the bright electric lights. They were jealous of the chewing gum in Xiao Yu's mouth and the blissful smile on her face, which was already able to spit out bubbles. Chapter 32. That night, there were probably not many people who could sleep peacefully in the entire Black Wharf. Yang Chendong was one of them. After he handed over the power-generating equipment to Luan Chi, it was equivalent to him unloading a burden. He also believed that with the other party's persistence and hard work, it was only a matter of time before electricity was created. After sleeping until dawn, Yang Chendong went to the barracks to accompany the soldiers for a 10-kilometer run. After eating a simple meal, he went to find a person called Kong'an. He was going to appoint him as the head of the paper mill. Paper making not only included the technique of making paper, but also toilet paper, diapers, sanitary napkins, and napkins. In this era, the things people used to relieve themselves were known as the 5-flower white door. Those who had no money would simply use a wooden stick. Only those who had enough money would use some coarse paper. Only those who were extremely rich would use soft cloth. If there was toilet paper, it would replace everything. This was a good thing that could promote the development of society and make a lot of money. How could Yang Chendong forget about it? Not to mention the uses of diapers, sanitary napkins, and napkins. It was definitely a good thing that one would not give up after using it once. Kong'an was a person who had done some research on paper making. Later on, he offended his superior and was kicked out of the capital. When Yang Chendong found out about this, he asked Yang San to personally find him. Needless to say, the deputy director of the security bureau was quite competent. Kong'an was successfully found and sent to the Black Wharf. People who had the basic knowledge could do things with twice the result with half the effort. This was also thanks to De Tsong's omnipotence and omnipotence. There was a comprehensive record of the progress of the paper-making technique in the book. Now that he had made some changes, he handed it over to Kong'an. With the cooperation of the garment factory's director, Zhou Hua, he believed that it wouldn't take long for him to receive a generous return. The construction of the weapon factory, furniture factory, garment factory, power plant, cement factory, and paper factory immediately promoted the development of society and technology. At the same time, it was also considered a business activity for the sake of making money in the future. It was just that a strong economy needed enough military support. Otherwise, all of this would just be a wedding dress for others. How to improve the strength of his equipment was the most important thing. Therefore, in the following period of time, Yang Chendong began to take the initiative to teach some courses that no one had ever taken before. For example, fighting, diving, flying, etc. The so-called confrontation referred to the division of the army into two groups to fight against each other. It could also be called a drill. Until now, none of the members of Cold Front had seen blood since training. This was unacceptable. After all, training and actual combat were two different things. If they didn't want problems to arise on the battlefield, they would have to start from actual combat and carry out more exercises. Only then would everyone be able to find their own shortcomings. Drills and confrontations were the best way. One side used cold weapons to represent the strength of the modern army, while the other side used hot weapons to attack. They also carried out several exercises with the goal of seizing cities and seizing islands. Many problems were found and corrected. Of course, diving did not refer to ordinary swimming. It referred to deep diving with special preparations. It could cross the ocean and guarantee that one would appear on a certain island without any signs of life. When the other party did not notice, one could suddenly launch a surprise attack. One could imagine how intimidating it would be to the other party. Speaking of flying, Yang Chendong had already found individual powered umbrellas in the big warehouse. Imagine if an army suddenly appeared in the sky and attacked the ground from the air. Wouldn't it give people the feeling that a divine army had descended from the sky? Unfortunately, the requirements to use the powered umbrellas were too strict. Without professional training and specialized clothing, it was very difficult to fly and land safely. For this reason, the sixth young master thought of a transitional method, which was to build some hot air balloons first. Hot air balloons were relatively simple to build and easy to operate. After everyone got used to staying in the air, they could start training with the powered umbrellas. That way, the accident rate would be reduced. However, even though they were hot air balloons, when they were made to fly, it still shocked Lung Song, Gao Xiong, and the others. They could not understand how people could fly. It completely went against their understanding. Regarding this, Yang Chendong said one sentence without holding back. Knowledge is power. Just this one sentence set off a wave of learning in the barracks. After the last incident, no one dared to say that Wenhua class was not important anymore. They were afraid that if they were too anxious, they would be kicked out. When Yang Chendong was there, whether it was the soldiers in the barracks or some of the residents who moved in from the Black Dock, they were all excited and happy. However, all good things must come to an end. Seeing that the new year was about to come, the sixth young master had to leave in the first month of the 11th year of the Orthodox dynasty. Originally, the duration of the camp this time had exceeded their previous expectations. Previously, they planned to stay for about 5 days before leaving. However, because of the excitement, Yang Chendong forgot about the time and stayed for nearly 2 months. Now that the end of the year was near, it involved some matters of ancestral worship. The sixth young master, who was the only one left in the Yang family mansion, had to rush back. However, before Yang Chendong was about to leave, he started to recruit people. He recruited children between the ages of 13 and 16, and stated that as long as they were willing to learn, there were no gender restrictions. After 2 months of contact, everyone knew the sixth young master's ability and power. Naturally, there were many people who signed up. Almost all the men and women of the right age in the Black Dock signed up. There were more than 300 people. Yang Chendong was going to personally teach these people and let them enter the army as political teachers. Sometimes, a military's political work was even more important than its military ability. After all, the more a disobedient army could fight, the more worrying it would be. Yang Chendong still remembered clearly how Yang and the others had advised him not to focus on cultural studies. He didn't want the same mistake to happen again. The reason he recruited these children was to prepare for a rainy day so that there wouldn't be any problems in the army. What Yang Chendong did not expect was that the enthusiasm for signing up was so high. Originally, he planned to only take in about 30 people. After all, the army was still too weak and did not need so many political teachers. Moreover, if there were too many people, he would not be able to take care of them. However, in the face of such a heated scene, he still decided to expand the recruitment. However, he only limited the number of people to 50. If there were more, he could not guarantee the quality. As such, when Yang Chendong said that he would only take in 50 people, fierce competition immediately began, and some people started to find ways to get in through the back door. Among them, what Yang Chendong did not expect was that the first person to find a way to get in through the back door was Zhou Hua. She brought her third son, Xiao Chen, and her youngest daughter, Xiao Yu. As soon as Zhou Hua entered Yang Chendong's office in the barracks, her face turned red. Obviously, she also knew that this kind of behavior was somewhat inappropriate. However, for the sake of her children's future, she still came without hesitation. Sixth young master, my Luanqi is shy. He did not want to come here, so I brought Xiao Chun and Xiao Yu. Can you take a look and see if you can accept them? Zhou Hua asked with a face full of expectation. Yang Chendong had already heard about Luanqi's family situation from Tiger's Mane. There were a total of 7 children. The eldest and second children were already of age and had signed up for the army. The fourth and fifth children were girls. Although the sixth child was a man, he had been in poor health since he was young. Therefore, only the third child, Xiao Chen, was left. He had just turned 15 years old, and Xiao Yu would be 10 years old after the new year. Most importantly, she admired Yang Chendong very much. This was why Zhou Hua brought her to try out this time. In fact, she did not have much hope. As long as her third son was selected, it was a good thing. He really wanted to reject this method of getting in through the back door. He wanted to create a fair competition system. However, Yang Chendong also knew that the selection of political teachers was different from other things. These people's backgrounds were very important. This was because if something went wrong with them, it would be a real problem. Luanqi was already the director of the power plant, and Zhou Hua was the director of the garment factory. Both of them were contributing to the development of the illegal dock, or rather, Yang Chendong's power. Naturally, their children would have no problems in the political examination. It was more reassuring to use people like this. Since Zhou Hua had come in person, it was not good to refuse. He could not hurt her feelings. Yang Chendong thought about it for a while and nodded gently. Xiao Chen, can you read? I can read, sixth young master. I can read, and I've also learned the new arithmetic you taught me. I can add and subtract numbers within 2 digits without any problem. Xiao Chen finally had the chance to speak, and he cherished it very much. Okay, then pack up and come back to Jianing with me in 2 days. However, you still have to take the written test. Xiao Chen's physique was considered strong. She was cultured and had a good foundation. Yang Chendong nodded and accepted her. As soon as she heard Yang Chendong agree, Zhou Hua was overjoyed and said excitedly, "Quick, thank the sixth young master." Xiao Chen was also quick-witted. He immediately knelt on the ground with a plop and kowtowed to settle the matter. However, what was a little ridiculous was that they were only 2 years apart in age. However, no matter how one looked at it, Yang Chendong was too outstanding. Zhou Hua was already very satisfied with the matter of her third son and Xiao Chen. She was ready to leave with her son and daughter. However, at this moment, Xiao Yu refused. She used all her strength to not let Zhou Hua take her away. Instead, she stubbornly said to Yang Chendong, "Big brother, Xiao Yu also wants to follow you." You're too young." Yang Chendong shook his head. Xiao Yu would only be 10 years old after the new year. First of all, she was not qualified in terms of age. "I'm not young, and I will grow up. The most important thing is that I listen to Big Brother more than anyone else." Xiao Yu shook her head like a rattledrum. Her eyes began to fill with tears. Xiao Yu's request put Yang Chendong in a difficult position. He had said that he would only accept children between the ages of 13 and 16. Xiao Yu was not qualified in terms of age. If he accepted her, what would others think? What would they think? Chapter 33. Yang Chendong was in a difficult position. He really liked Xiao Yu. Of course, he treated her like a child. But if he opened the back door because of this, would it have a bad impact? When Xiao Yu saw his troubled expression, she knew that there was a chance. She immediately gathered her courage and said, "Big brother, I'm just your little sister. I'm not considered one of the 50 people, right? After being corrected by Xiaoyu, Yang Qindong was suddenly enlightened. Yes, he could have said that she was his little sister. In the past 2 months, Xiaoyu would look for him whenever she had something to do. In the end, even Tiger's Mane and the others did not stop her. This was something that everyone knew. Naturally, there would not be any problems when he brought her along when he left. He did not expect that while he was still worrying, Xiaoyu would come up with a solution and an excuse first. This also made Yang Qindong look at her in a new light. Well, if that's the case, then you can follow me. You don't have to take the exam. Yang Qindong agreed, which made Xiaoyu very happy. She held her mother's hand and shook it constantly, as if she was asking for credit, but also as if she was expressing her joy. Zhou Hua also did not expect that this time the 2 children would be able to follow the 6th young master. In particular, the younger daughter was even more amazing. She became the only person who could follow the 6th young master without taking the exam. Xiaoyu's matter was just an interlude. Next, there were also people who wanted to go through the back door. Yang Qindong met some of them, such as Jing Shuang, the son of the cement factory director Jing Guang, Kong Jie, the son of the paper factory director Kong En, and a few others. However, he did not meet most of them. He just found a random reason to reject them. 3 days later, the exam began. It was divided into 2 parts, civil and military. The military part was to run a 3-kilometer race. If one could keep up with the team and not fall behind, they would pass. The civil part was also the most important part. It was to test arithmetic and write an article on understanding the illegal docks. It was stipulated that words that could not be written could be replaced by pinyin. From this, one could see what they were thinking in their hearts. They also held the initiative in their hands to decide who they wanted to recruit. The test lasted for a day, and the final results were announced at night. Naturally, some people were happy while others were sad. Fortunately, the Black Wharf was a place where everything flourished, and there were many things that could be done. Moreover, Yang Qindong also said that if there was a chance in the future, he would come here to recruit people to his side. Thus, the impact of the incident gradually subsided, and those who were not selected also returned to their normal state of mind. Early the next morning, Yang Qindong left the Black Pier. The selection was sent out before the sun rose, and it was requested that every person who was selected not be sent off by their parents. Otherwise, their quota would be revoked. This was also the first lesson that Yang Qindong taught everyone. Stay away from your parents and learn to be independent. Although this seemed a little cruel, it was beneficial for growth. Just like today's education, there was too much emphasis on grades. Most of the children were focused on studying, and very few teachers and schools paid attention to nurturing the children's character. Yang Qindong's way of doing things was to start with independence. Then he would let them suffer. Only such children could understand the warmth and coldness of human nature more deeply, and their chances of success when they grew up would naturally be much higher. 1447 AD, the 11th year of the Zhengtang Dynasty. The New Year's bell was rung. From this moment on, Yang Qindong was 17 years old. It had been nearly 2 years since he came to the Ming Dynasty. From nothing to something, his power had developed to today. It was likely that other than a limited number of people, no one knew how powerful he was now. The new year was at the Yang family's old house. As usual, the servants of the old house were given silver taels to celebrate the festive year, and then they went to worship the ancestors. After that, Yang Qindong did not return to the old house. Instead, he went to the Yang family village in the name of breathing fresh air and looking for inspiration to write stories. There were 50 people there. No, 51 students were waiting for him to teach. They were going to face a 3-month study, which was mainly cultural classes and supplemented by physical training. The training was in full swing, and the Yang family village also showed a semi-closed management. Although people were allowed to enter and leave, the inspection was particularly strict. During this time, Yang Sen had already found a few people who were suitable for intelligence and security work. The standard to assess whether or not they could become official members was to closely monitor everyone who entered the Yang family village and find suspicious people. It was said that it was easy to do things with money. Now, in the streets and alleys of Jianing Prefecture, who knew how many pairs of eyes of the Yang family were watching? They were either ordinary peddlers, waiters, or the boss of a grocery store. These people were not on the security bureau's list, and they did not even know who they were gathering intelligence for. These people only knew one thing, and that was that as long as they reported unusual things, they might be able to receive silver. If the matter was very important, they would receive even more rewards. People would die for money. Under such an incentive mechanism, naturally, a large amount of intelligence would be sent to Yang Sen every day. He would then hand over the valuable information to Tiger's Mane and give it to the sixth young master for review. With this mechanism, it could be said that once someone from the imperial court came to Jianing Prefecture, any unfamiliar face would be immediately discovered. In fact, all this was Yang Chendong's overthinking and caution. No one in the imperial court would target him, a mere 9th-level governor of Jianing Prefecture. If someone really wanted to deal with the Yang family, they would target the young masters and young ladies of the Yang family in the capital. Moreover, with Yang Rong's death, the power of the Yang family collapsed, and it could be said that it was difficult for everyone to protect themselves. Otherwise, it would have been more than a year since any of his relatives came to the old house of the Yang family to visit him. Of course, Yang Chendong's understanding was that these brothers and sisters must have their own difficulties. Perhaps they were in the capital and had no choice. In any case, he had heard from the old steward Yang Chendong that the young masters and young ladies of the Yang family did not have a good life in the capital. Even if they wanted to leave the capital, they had to report to their superiors, which was a little troublesome. Yang Chendong understood them a little. Moreover, after all, he had inherited this body. If possible, he would help them if he could. Indeed, no one in the imperial court paid attention to Yang Chendong. He just wrote a few wonderful stories in the Yang Bao. In the eyes of the big shots, it was just a side trick. He was only 17 years old, but he could be described as immature. Even so, no one would pay attention to him. Not to mention that the imperial court had its own difficulties. On the 17th day of the 11th year of the Zhengtong dynasty, the Minister of War, Kuang Yi, waited for a memorial. Walla Yeshen annexed the Arutai tribe when his father was leaving, and he grew stronger day by day. The Wara wanted to invade the border, which caused the tension on the border. In the 3rd month of the same year, Ingzong ordered the World School to take the entrance exam for students. It meant that more students could be recruited. They were not official students, but in the form of reserves. It was an act of accumulating talents for the country, but it was tantamount to expanding the power of the landowning households and increasing the number of people who had special privileges. What was the special privilege at that time? To put it bluntly, they didn't have to pay grain for farming, and they didn't have to pay taxes for doing business. And these students occupied a large amount of the country's land, causing the quality of life of the commoners to drop by more than one level. Many people worked hard for a year, and even when they had a good harvest at the end of the year, they still couldn't afford to pay the taxes. It was as the saying went, when the people prosper, the people suffer, but when the people die, the people suffer. Compared to the changes in the outside world, Yang Chendong was very well behaved. He stayed in the Yang family manor, saying that he was writing stories in peace and praying for his parents. In reality, he only used a little bit of time to write. Most of his time was spent on teaching these students. After such a long time, the manuscript of The Smiling, Proud Wanderer had already been completed, and the entire book had already been published. This time, many copies were sent to the capital, satisfying the appetites of some rich young masters and noble ladies. Following which, he started on the 4th book, The Legend of Chu Liuxiang. Once the new book was released, it was as popular as before. This time it was released at the same time. Not only in Jianing residence but also in the capital, it caused a frenzy of book fans. In the Hu residence, the elegantly dressed young lady Hu Yan was reading the latest issue of Yang Pao, which was serializing the legend of Chu Liuxiang. Pei. For some reason, Hu Yan suddenly scolded lightly, and then her face flushed red. That appearance was really shy and lovely. The maid Xiaoqing was dozing off when she was abruptly awakened by the young lady's movements. Then, she hurriedly looked around, and when she didn't see anyone else, she pouted and shook her head. "Young lady, are you going to scold Dong Shuai in your heart again?" "What Dong Shuai?" Hu Yan was confused. She knew about Xiang Shuai, and it was referring to Chu Liuxiang. But who was this Dong Shuai? What? Young lady doesn't even know about Dong Shuai? That's the name that everyone gave to the sixth young master of the Yang clan, Yang Qindong. In the book, he wrote that Chu Liuxiang had 8 close female friends, and that he liked all of them. Then, isn't this person also an affectionate young master? That's why everyone called him Dong Shuai. Xiaoqing brought out the words that she heard from others when she bought the Yang Pao. Hearing such an explanation, Hu Yan's face turned red and she said, "That's right, that Yang clan's 6th young master must be a dissolute young master. People say that one can judge one's actions based on one's observation." Hu Yan looked very angry. In fact, the reason why she was angry while reading the book was because she hated Chu Liuxiang for loving every woman he saw. She didn't believe that a man could truly love every woman by his side. Although it was said that the young master of a large clan would take a few concubines, that was only for the sake of having a prosperous family. How could a man truly love every woman he saw? At the very least, she didn't believe it. Chapter 34. As a result, she began to question Yang Qindong's character. At the same time, she was conflicted. What kind of man was he? She could write a hero like Gu Jing, a sheik like Li Xuanhuan, a real man like Ling Huchong, and now a sentimental man like Chu Liuxiang? Which one was the real him? The more she couldn't figure it out, the more curious she became. Hu Yan couldn't help but fall into a state of distress. It was said that no one knew a daughter better than her mother. The person who understood Hu Yan the most was her maid Xiaoqing. Seeing how troubled her mistress was, she naturally had to stand up and help her. She immediately took the initiative to say, "Mistress, I heard that Lord Hu has accepted a mission to the south to investigate some military matters. Why don't you let him go to Jianing Manor and meet this Yang Qindong? Wouldn't everything be clear then?" "Ah, let your father go? This can he agree?" Although Hu Yan's heart was somewhat moved after hearing this, it was more of a lack of confidence. Why wouldn't he agree? This is a father-in-law looking at his son-in-law. Besides, it's just a matter of convenience. What's wrong with that? As long as mistress uses your entanglement technique, Lord Hu won't disagree. Xiaoqing seemed to know her mistress's father very well, and appeared to have a card up her sleeve. "Ah. What do you mean by a father-in-law looking at his son-in-law? Xiaoqing, you dare to speak nonsense? You're asking for a beating." Hu Yan's face immediately turned red, making her look even cuter and more enchanting. But at the same time, she began to chase after Xiaoqing, unwilling to give up. No one knew whether Xiaoqing managed to catch up with her. But when Hu Zhongning returned home that night, Hu Yan took the initiative to rush over, and then, in the Yang Manor, the learning and training of the 51 people was nearing the end. During the learning period, everyone's physical strength was trained. Perhaps it was because of his young age, but he learned everything very quickly. Although he was very tired after a day of hard work, he relied on his young age and good food to recover his body very quickly. In terms of fighting strength, they were naturally inferior to the first batch of Lung Feng. But in terms of loyalty, they were definitely higher. In particular, Xiaoyu had played a huge role in this. Perhaps she had inherited her father, Luan Qi's smart genes. While the others were still studying with their heads down, Xiaoyu was the first to propose that the 6th young master should be the center, and that the 6th young master should be the leader. In particular, her learning ability was very strong. Coupled with the fact that she was Yang Qindong's little sister, although she was young, her reputation was not low. Even many children who were older than her lowered their heads and followed her lead. Not only that, but Xiaoyu and Xiao Yin were also very close. The two of them were 8 years apart, but sometimes they were as close as real sisters. Yang Qindong couldn't quite understand this. However, all he needed to know was that these two were on his side. They could do whatever they wanted. With Prestige and Xiao Yin on her side, Xiaoyu had more opportunities to see Yang Chendong alone. Under the constant begging, the sixth young master finally gave in to the young girl's attacks and handed over 3 songs. In the end, these 3 songs were all military songs. The first was the People's Liberation Army's military song. Yang Chendong called it a military song. Onward, onward, onward. Our troops face the sun, stepping on the land of our motherland. The second song was Coming Back from Target Practice. The sun sets in the west, the red clouds fly in the sky. The soldiers return from target practice, return from target practice. The red flags in the wind reflect the rosy clouds. Happy songs fill the sky. The third song was Red from the East. Red from the east, the sun rises. The country has produced a Yang Chendong. He seeks happiness for the people. He's the savior of the people. Reality had already proven that military songs could raise morale and strengthen the cohesion of soldiers. Many times, when military songs played, the soldiers' hormones would rise, and they would become excited and excited. The 3 military songs, especially the third one, had unknowingly raised his status. This was something Yang Chendong had thought about a long time ago. An army needed its own soul to ensure stability, and he was undoubtedly the best candidate. As for whether or not he had the suspicion of being Wangpa, that was up to each person. Not only did Yang Chendong hand over 3 songs, but he also handed over Little Rain's army song. The effect of the army song was great. Firstly, it could unite the morale and unite the people. A song could tie everyone's hearts together, and they could sing together loudly to show the majestic morale of the team. Secondly, it could inspire people and relieve pressure. Soldiers were already under a lot of pressure. A good song could encourage everyone to persevere together. They would bleed and sweat but not cry. They would not fall behind even if they lost skin and flesh. Thirdly, it could liven up the atmosphere. The military officers were strict, and the atmosphere was dull. The leader of the team sometimes lacked human touch, so he could liven up the atmosphere by singing. Fourthly, it could promote mutual understanding, understand each other, live in harmony, and form a united front. Like Who's the Hero? Who's the hero? Let's sing and compete. Hee hee, let's compete. 1 2 3 4 5 we've been waiting so hard. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 we've been waiting so anxiously. If I ask you to come, you'll come. You're too shy. If I ask you to sing, you won't sing. You're too shy. Hee hee, too shy, etc. Hearing these things, Xiaoyu's eyes widened, and her face was full of disbelief. At this moment, she worshipped the sixth young master even more. She wanted to know more about this big brother. What was in his head? Why did he have so many new and good things? She thought that she was already quite smart, but compared to the sixth young master, she was not even worth a finger. The military song was brought to the 51 people team by Xiaoyu, and it was quickly spread. These children were smart to begin with. After they read and learned how to read, they quickly entered the period of proficiency. Time slowly entered the middle of April. After the 51 political teachers, all of them passed the examination. Among them, 15 were excellent, 20 were good, and 16 passed. Among them, Xiaoyu and Xiaoqin both graduated with excellent results. On the night of graduation, a banquet was held in the Yang manor. However, everyone's mood was a little low. This was because they all knew that after graduation, they would not have the chance to see the sixth young master at such a close distance in the future. Feeling everyone's sadness, Yang Chendong raised his wine glass and said with a smile, "Tomorrow I'll go to the Black Dock with everyone. At that time, you'll see the exciting first appointment ceremony." Wow, that's great. Everyone immediately became happy. Everyone still did not understand what an appointment ceremony was, but to be able to go back to the Black Dock with the sixth young master and have more opportunities to interact with him was, of course, what everyone wanted. That night, many children got drunk, especially Xiaoyu, who drank a lot. She fell asleep in Yang Chendong's arms with a red face. In this regard, Yang Chendong did not have the slightest intention of blaming them. It was rare that he did not call for an emergency meeting at night. He knew that the 3 months of training were very difficult for these children. Their nerves were especially tense. Now that they had finally graduated, it was time for them to relax. Nothing happened that night. The next morning, everyone thought that they had set foot on the road back to the Black Dock with a new spirit. At the Black Dock, various factories had begun to be built one after another. Although they were facing a situation where they could be moved at any time, the factories were a bit simple and crude. However, this did not prevent them from creating their own path of innovation. Not only were the factories making great progress, the Navy's development was equally gratifying. Under the joint efforts of Gao Xiong and Lung Song, they had fought several naval battles in the past 3 months. Relying on their advanced weapons, strict military discipline, and excellent military training, they had won one battle after another. The Navy's fleet had also been greatly expanded. It was no longer like before when they only had 2 or 3 ships. Now, apart from the treasure ship, which was no longer being built in the Ming Dynasty, they had 1 second-class horse ship, 4 third-class grain ships, 10 fourth-class ships, and 20 fifth-class warships. When Yang Chendong brought 51 teachers to the Black Dock, the first thing he saw was this scene. Looking at so many warships by the port, the 6th young master's mood was very excited and surging. In 2 years, the Navy finally had a scale. It was the kind of scale that did not attract attention. With this, they already had the ability to dominate a corner of the sea. In other words, if there was any danger, Yang Chendong had a safe place to retreat to. Overjoyed, Yang Chendong generously took out a series of new cannons. For example, the largest second-class ship was equipped with a Type 87-82 mm mortar. It can accurately hit anything within a 5-7 km radius. It was also equipped with a Type 75-105 mm recoilless cannon. It had a range of 7-4 kilometers. The other third-class grain ships, fourth-class ships, and fifth-class warships were also equipped with various types of cannons. The range was between 1.5 kilometers and 5 kilometers. The accuracy and range of modern cannons was far from what the civilization and technology of that time could compare to. It could be said that with these, in addition to the brave soldiers, there was no naval fleet that could not be defeated. With these, Yang Chendong finally issued his first order. That was to expand outward, preparing to take down Qiqian City, Tainan City, and Ryukyu Island. At the same time, they would dominate this part of the Ryukyu Sea. Any ships that passed through here would either pay a heavy tax and become friends, or be destroyed and sunk. Finally, they were prepared to take down Qiqian City and the entire Ryukyu Island. Gao Xiong, Lung Song, and the others were very excited. Gao Xiong was in charge of the naval battle and the landing on the sea. After that, the land battle of Qiqian City would be led by Lung Song. This was not a drill, nor was it a small skirmish. It was a real conquest of the island. The scouts had already investigated thoroughly. There were 30 to 40,000 people living in Chokin Castle, and the entire Ryukyu Island had more than 200,000 soldiers and soldiers. If they were to occupy that place, it was easy to imagine how huge the base would become. Chapter 35. Yang Chendong expressed his understanding of the general's excitement. He also made a request, which was that they could not conquer the entire Ryukyu Island in one go. Instead, they should first take down Qiqian City and use it as a stronghold to slowly expand to the entire island. This was to slowly assimilate them and make them submit. Yang Chendong naturally had his own plans for making such a decision. In the end, Ryukyu was still a vassal state of the Ming Dynasty and belonged to the category of non-conquering states. What Dabai meant was that Ryukyu regarded the Ming Dynasty as their leader and would pay tribute every few years. As a condition, if someone attacked them and threatened them, the Ming Dynasty had the obligation to send troops to help them. Yang Chendong did not want to become enemies with the powerful Ming Dynasty, so he naturally would not do such a thing. More importantly, in order to develop in the future, he needed a large number of people. While he could not steal people from the Ming Dynasty, he could only use the natives of Ryukyu Island. Every life here was precious. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he could not casually kill them. After all, a country was based on people. Without a large population, it would be extremely difficult to do anything. Yang Chendong wanted to peacefully take over Ryukyu Island. To this end, he made 3 decisions. First, in order to not spread the news, the attack on Chichen City would be carried out in the name of pirates. This way, even if someone leaked the news, it would not be related to him for the time being. Second, he strengthened his control over this area of the sea. He only allowed people to enter and not leave Ryukyu Island. Anyone who left the island would be strictly checked. If there were suspicions, he would be detained. In short, he would not allow anyone to spread the news of Ryukyu being attacked. Third, when attacking Ryukyu Island, he could use both civil and military forces. That was, he could use military force to intimidate. For example, when attacking Chichen City, he could use cannons and modern firearms. He had to take down the city with lightning speed and intimidate the people. Afterward, the political instructors began to work, focusing on persuasion and persuasion. In addition, various factories were built one by one. He greatly promoted irrigation, built cement horse tracks, and created prosperous businesses. This allowed everyone to have things to do, food to eat, and money to earn. When a person had enough to eat and drink, they would get used to this kind of peaceful life. Their thoughts of rebellion would fade a lot, and it would be easier to manage. As for the issue of feeding everyone, Yang Chendong had already made relevant arrangements. He took out a lot of potatoes from the big warehouse and prepared to plant them on Ryukyu Island. At that time, the crop yield was extremely low, no more than 2 dan. 1 dan is equivalent to about 188 caddies today. Potatoes, however, could yield as low as 15 dan, and as high as 20 or 30 dan. With this item, it would not be difficult for the commoners to fill their stomachs. Everyone had their own problems, and it was easy to solve the problem at work. The roads on Ryukyu Island needed to be repaired, and new cement houses needed to be built. All of these required a lot of men. Moreover, he would need a lot of manpower to build a glass factory and a granary in the future. As for women, they could work in garment factories. Those who were cultured could become teachers. They could also learn new songs and join the propaganda team. They could also enter the hospital after learning new songs. It didn't matter if they served the army or the people. As for those who were uncultured and unable to learn, they could become cleaners and maintain the hygiene and cleanliness of the entire island. They could even become the female militia and contribute to the protection of the island. Yang Chendong even had arrangements for the children. They could study in school while joining the children's regiment. They could also be on guard duty or undergo military training. At that time, if someone wanted to inquire about information, they would be caught by the female militia and the children's regiment before the security bureau could get the news. This was planning for a rainy day. While many people were still excited about attacking Kaiken Castle and occupying Ryukyu Island, Yang Chendong was one step ahead of them and came up with sufficient solutions for the problems that would occur in the future. Of course, the reason why Yang Chendong was so cautious was because there were too many Han people on Ryukyu Island. They were his own compatriots, and he absolutely could not kill them casually. Of course, the more Han people could live, the better. On the other hand, if it was the Japanese Empire, he was afraid that he could only sweep through and kill those who did not comply to prevent future troubles. After formulating all kinds of attacks and solutions, and even arranging the specific people in charge one by one, the conferring ceremony officially began. 1447, 11th year of Zhengtong, 28th day of the 4th month. On this day, the wind was gentle and the sun was bright, the sky clear. The beach in front of the Black Dock was crowded with people. All the soldiers and civilians of the Black Dock were present. From the elderly over 60 years old to the babies who were only 1 or 2 months old, they were all mobilized here. The population reached nearly 10,000. This was specially emphasized by Yang Chendong. The conferring ceremony was solemn and formal, so it naturally needed to be watched by all. Right now there were still very few people under him, so he had to mobilize all of them. When the next conferring ceremony came, there was no need to mobilize the elderly and children. Even the common people, under the semi-military management, stood in an orderly manner. No one made any disturbances. Other than a few babies crying out because they were hungry, there was no other sound. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Yang Chendong, who was dressed in military uniform, was the first to walk up to the temporary cement award platform. He walked to a standing microphone that he had obtained from the warehouse. It was connected to 4 huge loudspeakers, enough to ensure that his every word would be transmitted to everyone's ears. Yang Chendong, dressed in martial attire, was wearing the marshal's uniform. A souvenir from the warehouse was found. The marshal's epaulette was golden yellow with red edges. It was 14 centimeters long and 5.8 centimeters wide. There was an additional circle of silver-white pine branches around the epaulette. The 2 national emblems on the epaulette were made of pure gold. The star emblem and pine branches were embroidered with silver thread. The layer of golden yellow on the epaulette was made of pure copper wire, and then gilded. The cap emblem, star emblem, and symbols of the marshal's uniform were also made of pure copper. The golden areas were gilded with gold, and the silver-white areas were gilded with silver. The chest area of the marshal's uniform was embroidered with golden ribbons and tassels. The cuffs and collar were embroidered with golden embroidery. The edges of the pants were embroidered with golden and bright red stripes. They were all embroidered with pure gold thread. Wearing the blue military uniform, Yang Chendong's figure was even more tall and straight. Paired with the shiny leather shoes and the majestic cap, it instantly gave people the feeling that they had to look up to him. Yang Chendong, wearing white gloves, first solemnly raised his right hand and saluted in a very standard military salute. Then he decisively put it down and looked at the people below the stage. He said in an excited voice, "Today all of us will be here to witness the arrival of a sacred moment, and that is the military's conferring ceremony. The military's duty is to protect the country. Their existence is to protect everyone's lives and property. In order to complete this mission, they have to sacrifice their youth and even their lives. Therefore, being a soldier is glorious and sacred. The military cares about the family and forgets about the family. They can't be blasphemed. However, since ancient times, no country in history has ever had a military holiday. This is unfair and unjust. I, Yang Chendong, hereby announce that in order to show my respect and gratitude to the military, August 1st of every year will be Army Day. This is a military holiday, a holiday unique to them. That day belongs to them. Glory and glory will only bloom for them. Long live the 6th young master. Long live the 6th young master. It was the first time that the status of a soldier had been raised to such an extent. For a moment, the excited soldiers below the stage began to shout loudly. They shouted with all their might to express their feelings of being soldiers who would die for their friends. In the crowd, Xiaoyu was also tearing up when she heard Yang Chendong's words. Seeing that everyone's morale was so high, she was excited. She suddenly had a bright idea and sang loudly. The east is red, the sun rises. The country has produced a Yang Chendong, he is the people. As soon as Xiaoyu started singing, her voice immediately became louder. The other 50 teachers who knew this song sang loudly at the top of their lungs at this moment to express their feelings. As for the other soldiers, they could only stare with their eyes wide open. They couldn't get a word in. After all, they hadn't learned this song yet. But even so, the singing of 51 people, no. It should be 54 people. There were also Qiao Yin, Beta Persei, and Yang Si from Jianing Prefecture. 54 voices shouted loudly. It was not a small momentum. They smoothly finished singing the first time. The general idea of the lyrics was also heard by the other soldiers. He Yang, Song Desheng, and the other 5 teachers felt the meaning of this song. They made up their minds to find Xiaoyu and the others immediately after the ceremony. They must learn this new song first. After Dongfang Honga finished singing, the scene quieted down again. Yang Chendong's eyes were bright. He said in a loud voice, "Next, we invite the conferring personnel to come to the stage. The ceremony officially begins." As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of orderly footsteps could be heard on the stage. Tiger's Mane took the lead, followed by Gao Xiong, Leng Song, Yu Guang, Teng Shan and Xiaofeng. They were all dressed in uniform. Among them, Tiger's Mane, Leng Song, Teng Shan, and Xiaofeng were dressed in pine branch green. They looked more calm and dignified. Gao Xiong and Yu Guang were dressed in white navy uniforms. They looked so dazzling and radiant. 6 sets of uniform were neatly worn on their bodies. They looked so neat and straight. Coupled with the large caps with the badges of the 88, They looked even more spirited and elegant. On their feet were black leather shoes that no one had ever seen before. A pair of white and clean gloves made them look very capable and imposing. As soon as this outfit came out, many young ladies and young wives in the audience widened their eyes. Some of the bolder ones were already blushing. They didn't even know where to put their hands. Chapter 36. At this moment, Tiger's Mane and the other 5 were also very excited. Especially Xiaofeng. He was not famous and was only an old member of Lungfeng. However, because of his outstanding performance, especially during the recent naval battle, he cooperated with Yu Guang to take over the largest horse ship. He was the first to board the ship by diving, and controlled more than 200 people on the ship with a Type 81 rifle. He was recorded as a great merit after the battle. This time, Yang Qindong directly included him in the first batch of 6 officers for the conferment ceremony. Tiger's Mane and the other 5 walked excitedly in front of Yang Qindong, who was wearing the commander's uniform. Then, a gorgeous long military rank appeared on the empty epaulets. Just now, everyone felt that Tiger's Mane and the other 5 were lacking something. When the military ranks, cauliflowers, and the Type 81 insignia were put on one by one, their spirits were lifted. They gave off a feeling of perfection and impeccable. Among the 6, Tiger's Mane was given the rank of captain, which was also the highest among the 6. Gao Xiong and Lung Song were given the rank of first lieutenant, while the other 4 were given the rank of second lieutenant. These were the 6 officers under Yang Qindong. After being conferred their ranks, the 6 of them uniformly saluted Yang Qindong, and at the same time declared their loyalty to the 6th young master and the people. Then, a large number of soldiers who had passed Lung Feng's training walked up the stage. There were a total of 320 people, including He Yang, Song Deshang, and the other 4 instructors. This time, the 5 of them were not selected as officers. This was a lesson that Yang Qindong wanted to teach them. This kind of punishment was not excessive for underestimating the importance of cultural studies. However, it was too late for the 5 of them to regret it. If they had known this would happen, they would not have underestimated the importance of cultural studies. However, it was too late to say anything now. They could only perform well and hope that they would be included in the next conferment ceremony. 320 people walked up the stage. They had already changed into civilian clothes. Although it was a soldier's uniform, it still gave people a refreshing feeling. If it weren't for the example of Tiger's Mane and the other 5 officers, their appearance would definitely have attracted waves of screams. Even so, there were still many young men and women below the stage who looked envious. The 6th young master had said that not only men could become soldiers, but women could as well. There were even some special military branches that only women could do better. As for the other 2,000 auxiliary soldiers, they were also the reserve soldiers. When they saw the 320 soldiers standing neatly on the stage, they were all looking forward to the day when they would be recognized and pass the test. How cool would it be to finally get a set of such clothes? Presumably, when that day came, they wouldn't have to worry about finding a wife anymore. There were 320 people, some in white Navy uniforms, and some in green Army uniforms. One by one, they walked up to Yang Qindong and were given a cauliflower, a cap badge and a private first-class epaulet. This was a symbol of identity and status. In addition, everyone also received a training uniform under the Type 07 uniform, a pair of combat boots, a beret, and a belt. The Army mainly wore camouflage uniforms, while the Navy had a white upper body and dark lower body. As for their weapons, they received a Type 95 assault rifle, a 3-shuttle bayonet, a combat shovel, and a number of grenades and other items. These 320 people passed the physical fitness, military literacy, and cultural tests. Their scores reached the level of elite veterans in the future, and the only thing they lacked was combat. Once they finished 100 battles, they would inevitably become an invincible army. The 320 people were also assigned to the Army and Navy as the backbone of their existence. In the future, depending on their performance, it wouldn't be long before there would be a lot of officers. But the next time, Yang Chendong might not be able to personally award them one by one. From beginning to end, the award ceremony was carried out under thunderous applause. Every time a soldier's epaulet was crowned with the rank of private first class, it would attract fierce applause from below. These people seemed to see themselves tomorrow. This applause was not only support and envy, but also encouragement and self-awakening. This conferring ceremony greatly elevated the status of the soldiers, increasing their sense of honor and belonging. Facts also proved that after the ceremony, more and more people signed up to join the army, and even some old people and women asked to sign up. Later, it was Yang Chendong who personally expressed his stance that the matter calmed down. He promised that every industry was a contribution, not only soldiers. As long as they made an outstanding contribution, the effect would be the same. Next, he would prepare enough medals to reward those who made outstanding contributions. And the medals were not limited to soldiers, workers, farmers, even teachers and businessmen, and even members of the children's regiment. As long as they had outstanding performance, they could also receive medals. Medals were also divided into grades, which meant that glory could also be exchanged for money. In other words, it was a symbol of status, but it could also be used to supplement the family. Of course, in the future, if someone received a medal, whether or not they would use it to make money was another matter. Unless they couldn't live anymore, no one would do that. After the award ceremony, Yang Chendong stayed at the illegal docks for 5 days. He looked at the progress of some factories, gave some valuable suggestions, and listened to Gao Xiong and Lung Song's plan to jointly attack Crimson Castle and occupy the entire Ryukyu Island. After that, he got up and left. There was no other way. With Yang Chendong's current status, it was very difficult for him to stay at the illegal docks for too long. If someone went to Yang Village and couldn't find him, then there would be an unknown problem. Before he had enough strength, Yang Chendong still had to be careful. After bidding farewell to Lung Song, Gao Xiong, and the others, as well as the sobbing Xiaoyu and the others, he finally got into the carriage and returned to Jianing Manor after he repeatedly promised that if Xiaoyu performed a meritorious deed, he would personally confer the title to her. In the carriage, Xiao Yin considerately placed a thick cushion behind Yang Chendong to make it more comfortable for him to lean on. After watching Xiao Yin carefully do all this, she lowered her head and didn't say anything. Yang Chendong could tell that she had something on her mind. He smiled and moved his head closer. "What's wrong, Yin? Is there something you're unhappy about?" "Nothing." Xiao Yin is envious of the young master's elegance. When she praised someone, her tone was so powerless. Yang Chendong was even more certain of his judgment. His expression also became more serious. "Yin, you must have something on your mind. Tell young master." "Of course, if you don't say anything, then you're not of one mind with the young master. I'll find someone to marry you off." Yang Chendong, who cared a lot about Xiao Yin, used a threatening tone as he spoke. If he really had to marry Xiao Yin off, he was afraid that he would be the first one to miss. Xiao Yin also cared a lot about Yang Chendong. When she heard this, she was frightened. Her face immediately fell, and she looked like she was about to cry. "Young master, Xiao Yin has something on her mind. I'm worried about you, young master. You mustn't marry Yin off." As she spoke, Xiao Yin threw herself into Yang Chendong's embrace. Her tears flowed down uncontrollably. Previously, when she saw Yang Chendong doing something, Xiao Yin was happy but also worried. After seeing the appointment ceremony this time, she had a better understanding of the young master's strength. This inevitably made her worry even greater. The Ming Dynasty didn't allow for the raising of private soldiers. Even princes with the same surname weren't allowed to have them. What kind of person was Yang Chendong? He was just a young scholar. Of course, now that he was a 9th-ranked official, if news of the illegal docks were to spread, then he would definitely be beheaded. It wouldn't even be excessive to implicate the 3 families. In Xiao Yin's heart, the young master was so knowledgeable and so capable. Now that he was an official, if he continued to develop, then his future would be limitless. At the very least, he wouldn't have a problem with having enough food and clothing. So why did he have to do something similar to rebellion? She was a bit afraid and even panicked because of her fear. She was worried about what would happen to the young master if news of the illegal docks were to spread one day. When that time came, what should she do? Holding the crying Xiao Yin in his arms, young Chendong stretched out his right hand and gently patted her back. His expression was a bit more peaceful. He knew what Xiao Yin was worried about, and knew even more clearly what he was doing. Perhaps it was as others thought. He could let go. With the resources and ability in his hands, being a safe young master wasn't a problem at all. But could he really do that? He would marry in the future, have children, and have descendants. Perhaps he would be able to live peacefully in his lifetime. But what about his children? What about his children and grandchildren? Once the Ming Dynasty fell and the Tatars entered the pass, they could all become slaves. This was definitely not what Yang Chendong wanted. When he thought of that, his heart would ache. This was the main reason why he wanted to establish his own power. As the saying goes, it's better to rely on yourself than on others. Rather than hoping for the younger generation to work hard, it was better to do something himself. At the very least, he would create better conditions for them. Even if there was danger, under the powerful protection and umbrella he established, he would have more time and opportunities to avoid disaster. Of course, Yang Chendong had a bottom line when doing things. That was, he wouldn't take the initiative to make a move against the Han people. Because they were his own people, he would unite as many as he could and help as many as he could. Unless they killed themselves, he wouldn't make a move against them. Secondly, it would depend on the attitude of the imperial court towards him. If he could use his thoughts to influence the emperor and make him make some reforms that would benefit the people and govern the Ming Dynasty well, his power would only be on the sea and not on the mainland. It was still the same sentence. Yang Chendong had always admired the backbone of the Ming Dynasty. He also admired the emperor's behavior of guarding the country. At the very least, the emperors of other dynasties couldn't compare to him in this aspect. But what if he couldn't influence them? Then he could only play by ear. Since Yang Chendong was blessed by the heavens to come to the great Ming Dynasty and brought so many good things, if he didn't do anything, wouldn't he be betraying the heavens? At least, that was what he thought. Chapter 37. He did have some ideas, but it wasn't the time to tell her everything. Even in front of Xiao Yin, he couldn't tell her everything. Could he tell Xiao Yin that the great Ming Dynasty would be destroyed in less than 200 years, and would be ruled by the descendants of the Jurchens? At that time, would all the Han people be left behind and become slaves of the Manchurian Qing? Even if he was willing to tell her, even if Xiao Yin worshipped him, she probably wouldn't believe him. Since that was the case, there was no point in saying more. It was better to follow his own ideas. I know what you're worried about. But look, isn't the young master fine now? Moreover, I've already made them prepare to leave the illegal docks. Once they find a new place to live, there won't be any leaks. Young master, I will be safe. Young master, do you know what is worried about? I only thought of this method to take them in because I pitied them. In fact, also saw that the people at the illegal docks, regardless of gender or age, which one of them isn't living happily? Presumably, this kind of life is something they didn't even dare to think about before. And I, young master, have helped them realize it. Isn't this also a great merit? There's no need to think so much. In a person's life, danger is everywhere. If you're not careful, you'll be hit by a rock or struck by lightning. Sometimes, you'll even choke to death while drinking water. Life is short. It's like a fleeting cloud. Since we're lucky enough to come to this world, of course, we have to do as much as we can to do what we like. That way we won't live in vain. Don't you think so? Also, young master can promise that as long as we're not in danger, these people will only move around at sea and won't appear beside us. What do you think? While persuading her, Yang Chendong gently stroked Xiao Yin's back, down to her hair, and finally cupped her cheeks and looked at her seriously. Really? Will they affect the young master if they're just out at sea? Originally, Xiao Yin was only worried about Yang Chendong. She was afraid that her actions would be known by others, and that the imperial court would punish the young master. If that happened, it would be equivalent to her being ruined. If that happened, there would be no meaning in her life. More importantly, Xiaoyin believed that since she was the young master's personal maidservant, she had to stand up and warn him when she saw that something was dangerous. This was her duty and responsibility. Now that Yang Chendong said that there was no intention of rebellion, and that as long as there was no danger, those people would only stay at sea, they immediately became happy. Of course, when has the young master ever lied to Yin? Yang Chendong saw that Xiao Yin had been persuaded and his mood improved. He reached out his hand and tapped Xiao Yin's nose. Only then did Xiao Yin realize that she was so close to the young master. Her face immediately turned red, and when she felt a light scratch on the bridge of her nose, she threw him a coquettish look and said, "Young master is naughty." At this moment, Xiao Yin was so charming. In addition to her good looks, she had been eating well and sleeping well for the past 2 years. Her body had already become plump. All of this caused Yang Chendong's heart to sway. Even his body began to react. Cough. In order to avoid awkwardness, he felt that his body was only 17 years old. It was still too early for him to do certain things. He should wait a little longer. Otherwise, it would be detrimental to his health. Thus, he forcefully suppressed the excitement in his heart and tilted his head. With a sleepy expression, he said, "That Yin or the young master is tired. He wants to sleep for a while." Xiao Yin had already noticed Yang Chendong's tall tent. She was already 18 years old, so she had already heard about it from her mother in the Yang family's old residence. Her face immediately turned red. Her heart was filled with joy because this proved her charm. However, she still said with concern, "Young master, if you're tired, then go to sleep. When it's time to eat, I'll have the tiger's mane stop and call you." Okay. At this moment, Yang Chendong felt very uncomfortable. He had actually lost his composure in front of Xiao Yin. After all, he had lived 2 lives. His mental age was already 40 years old. This really shouldn't be happening. He didn't know how to deal with the awkwardness in front of him. He simply tilted his head and went to sleep for a while. June 1447. Duking Zhangfu's farmland was seized. Eunuch Xining tried to seize Duking Zhangfu's farmland, but Zhangfu refused. Xining's brother Xisheng led his dying slaves to beat up Zhangfu's wife, causing her to become pregnant and die. Zhangfu complained to Yingzong, but Yingzong refused to help Xining's brother. Afterwards, Xining instructed the Qing County magistrate to falsely accuse Zhangfu of seizing 20 hectares of farmland. In June, Zhangfu was ordered to return the farmland to the people. Zhangfu could only obey. He was an old official of 4 dynasties and a meritorious official in the Battle of Jingnan. He led the army south to conquer Annan, destroyed the Hu dynasty, and achieved countless military merits in 3 expeditions to the north. However, in his later years he still couldn't avoid being bullied. Even a random eunuch could give him a hard time. Even if he complained, he wouldn't receive the emperor's favor. This represented the immense power of the eunuchs. Many old officials were bitterly disappointed. However, in order to not be implicated, no one dared to stand out and say a few words of justice. When the news spread and reached Yang Chendong's ears, he couldn't help but sigh. From this matter, he seemed to have seen his own future. Once he entered the capital and became an official, he would have to deal with eunuchs. At that time, how could he let them have their way? If he really offended them, who knew if the same thing would happen to him? If that was the case, wouldn't he have to swallow his pride like Duking? He had made so many contributions, and was an old minister of several dynasties. In terms of qualifications and experience, he could be considered qualified. However, he was still unable to escape the fate of being bullied. This was tantamount to sounding the alarm bell for Yang Chendong. It made him firmly believe that maintaining a sufficient armed force was extremely important. A month later, good news came from the Black Pier. After careful planning, Gao Xiong and Leng Song had worked together, and 7 days ago, they had successfully taken Crimson City and taken control of the situation there. The messenger had also sent a few plans and blueprints for the construction of Crimson City. Once the 6th young master agreed, they could begin to implement them. Holding the map of Crimson City, Yang Chendong did not sleep for the entire night. He spent half the morning perfecting the map and marking the locations of the factories. After that, he wrote a letter to Gao Xiong and Leng Song, congratulating them on their victory. At the same time, he reminded them not to be arrogant. They had to follow their previous plan and slowly expand their territory and influence through assimilation. At the same time, they had to seal off Ryukyu Island, so that only people could enter and not leave. They couldn't allow any news of what had happened there to be leaked, especially to the Great Ming. For the sake of safety, Yang Qindong's method of communicating with others was always in the form of a secret letter, which was written with sugar water. Sugar water was a carbohydrate, an organic substance. When written on paper, it was colorless, but when burned, the organic substance would carbonize and turn black. In reality, all organic substances would turn black when burned. This technique sounded very simple, but no one knew about it at the time. It was guaranteed that even if the letter fell, no one would know what was written on it. With Crimson City taken, the Black Pier began to move. Most of the factories, civilians, and barracks there would be demolished, leaving behind only a few small houses for daily communication. This way, even if someone discovered that place, it wouldn't be a big problem. Yang Qindong could finally have a good night's sleep. Ever since the Black Pier had been established, Yang Qindong had been very cautious. Gao Xiong had said more than once that the Black Pier was in a very remote location and was destined to be very difficult to discover. But its existence meant that there was a chance of it being discovered. This was inevitable. As a result, he hadn't had a single day of proper rest. Now that the Black Pier had moved, the stone hanging from his heart could finally be put down. This also meant that his plans for the seaside had officially come to an end. What came next was to prepare for the capital. For this matter, Yang Qindong called the old butler, Yang Hai, over. He had to trouble him to make a trip to the capital and find a good place on the outskirts of the capital. It had to be at least 1,000 mu to 2,000 mu. He wanted to build a Yang family manor in the north. There were two reasons for this. Firstly, he wanted to plant potatoes. This was a high-yield crop that no one knew about, so naturally, he had to experiment with it first. In truth, there wasn't much to experiment with. Yang Qindong was only doing this to give others a visual impact, so as to obtain a better reputation for himself, and perhaps even a better official position. Secondly, and most importantly, he needed a relatively safe place. He didn't want to live in the capital. If any danger were to occur, he wouldn't have enough time to react, and there wouldn't be enough time. But if he were to live outside the capital, he would have more protection. With the name of potatoes, no one would be able to criticize him. In short, Yang Qindong had always been on guard. He would definitely not be like Zhang Fu, who would let others bully him without retaliating. People said that even a rabbit would bite when cornered. As for whether Yang Qindong would bite someone or not, it would depend on how anxious he was and how much he was forced to do so. Bringing the potato seeds and some farmers of the Yang family manor, butler Yang Hai began his journey to the north. This time, he would stay there until the sixth young master went to the capital. Then he would hand over the position of butler to his son, Yang Nung, and return to the old house in Janning Mansion to enjoy the rest of his life. This was also approved by Yang Qindong. This time, Yang Hai also brought his son, Yang Nung, to teach him what a good butler should do. Everything seemed to be going very smoothly, and Yang Qindong was only waiting for the coming year. Once the mourning period was over, he would enter the capital and pay his respects to the prosperity of the capital. But just as he was about to do so, an unexpected guest suddenly appeared outside his old estate. Chapter 38. Yang Qindong, who was writing the Chu Liuxiang series of stories, Legend of the New Moon, suddenly saw Tiger's mane rushing over from the corner of his eye. Beside him, Xiao Yin was still grinding ink as if she hadn't heard him. Yang Qindong coughed lightly. "Our young master is feeling a little thirsty." "Oh, Xiao Yin will bring some tea for young master." Xiao Yin apologized and left. Tiger's mane flashed into the study and said with a hint of anxiety in his voice, "Young master, someone saw a dozen strangers in the city. They have embroidered spring blades on them, and 3 of them are heading towards our old mansion." "People from the embroidered uniform guard?" Yang Chendong frowned when he heard the name embroidered spring blades. He couldn't figure out what these people were doing here. Did they discover something? That shouldn't be the case. It had been some time since the people from the illegal docks moved away. If they were here to cause trouble, they wouldn't have come at this time. Moreover, there were only 3 of them. Wasn't that looking down on them too much? Although the embroidered uniform guard in East Rock didn't need any reason to capture people and were very domineering, it didn't seem right to say that there were only 3 of them out on official business. In that instant, Yang Chendong thought of many questions in his mind. Then he determined that the 3 of them weren't here to capture people. Perhaps there was something else. Young master, what should we do? Tiger's Mane looked nervous. According to his plan, he would directly control the 3 of them so that they wouldn't be able to enter the old mansion. Then he would find a safe place to ask them, and everything would be clear. If they really discovered something and wanted to capture people, then they would directly go to Crimson City and stay there. It should be incomparably safe with the sea between them. Let's wait and see first. After Yang Chendong determined that they weren't here to capture people, he decided to wait and see. Then he thought of something and reminded Tiger's Mane. Don't make a move without my orders, understand? Yes, young master. Seeing how resolute Yang Chendong was, Tiger's Mane didn't dare to make a decision on his own, so he agreed and left. At this moment, Xiaoyin walked in with a cup of hot tea. Her timing was impeccable. Outside the Yang clan's old mansion, 3 men dressed in casual clothes but carrying embroidered spring blades slowly walked past the Yang's gate. You feel that someone is watching us? The young master's man's eyes is Mane's eyes. T's Mane's mane. Although this person was a little older, in his early 40s, it still couldn't hide the heroic spirit on his face. It could be imagined that when he was young, he must have been a handsome young master. Head. I don't see anyone following us. One of them looked around and shook his head. That's right, boss. This is a private visit, and we never revealed our identities. This isn't the capital, and no one in this tiny Jianing prefecture would be able to recognize us. The other man confidently replied. Is that so? In that case, I must have been mistaken. The Mane's mane shook his head and looked around. When he didn't find anyone suspicious on the street, he relaxed. How about this? We'll leave through the back door. Like you said, we're not here for official business, so let's not go through the front door. We'll scare people. The 3 of them paused on the street for a short while before taking a detour to the back door of the Yang's mansion. Normally, unless something major had happened, only the side door and the back door would be open. The side door was for visitors and people of status to enter and leave, while the back door was for the servants to move about. The Yang's mansion was no exception. Because it was almost lunchtime, there were quite a few people going in and out, saving the 3 of them the trouble of knocking on the door. They stepped through the door as soon as they arrived. This was Yang Chendong's intention. His actions were known by very few people in the Yang's mansion. He wanted to take the opportunity to let others know that he was an honest young master, and did not have any bad intentions. The 3 of them walked into the backyard without being stopped. It was only when they entered the inner courtyard that someone came over to question them. Seeing that someone finally came over to question them, one of the lackeys couldn't help but say, "The management of the Yang's mansion is too lax. We're already here, but someone came over to ask about our identities. If we had any bad intentions, wouldn't we be able to easily take the 6th young master's life?" That's right. I heard that this person was very powerful, especially when it came to writing martial arts stories. Now that I think about it, he's probably just an armchair strategist. The other lackey also had a look of support and agreement. When the middle-aged man heard the discussion of the 2 lackeys, he didn't say anything to stop it. This was because he had the same opinion. At this moment, the thought of being spied on had completely disappeared. It must have been an illusion. The person who walked up was a steward of the backyard. He was usually in charge of 4 or 5 Yang's servants. It was because of this identity that he couldn't help but curiously greet the strangers when he saw that there were no Yang's people leading the way. The 3 of you? Who are you? Who are you looking for? How did you get here? Being stopped, the middle-aged man didn't panic at all. On the contrary, he was very calm and said confidently, "We're looking for the sixth young master. We're his old friends." Old friends? Looking at the middle-aged man's age, the steward of the backyard didn't believe it. Who was the sixth young master? How old was he? How could he have friends of this age? Moreover, these people were his friends. It didn't make sense for them to come to the backyard instead of paying a visit to the front door. Hee, I don't think you're the young master's old friends. You're here to ask the young master to tell you a story, right? The steward of the backyard thought that he had guessed correctly. With a dark smile, he wanted to shout and summon people to chase these three people out. Ever since the rise of Yang Bao, there were many people who wanted to see the sixth young master. However, because the young master rarely received guests, he used the excuse that it wasn't appropriate for him to receive guests at home. This caused some people to have crooked thoughts. There really were all kinds of people. The three people in front of him were probably people who wanted to fish in troubled waters from the backyard. The steward thought that he had seen through the clues. He opened his mouth and was about to shout when a pair of large hands flashed over and covered his mouth. Let me tell you, if you don't want to cause trouble, don't shout. The person who made the move was the middle-aged man. As he spoke, he took out an ivory belt. It was the special identification of the embroidered uniform guards. There were all kinds of rumors about the embroidered uniform guards and the East Factory. They really took orders from the emperor and had unimaginable power. They didn't need any evidence to arrest people. Sometimes, they even relied on their mood. In particular, the ivory belt they used made people's expressions change. It went without saying what it represented. Now that it appeared in front of him, the steward's legs went soft and he was about to kneel on the ground. The middle-aged man used a bit of strength and lifted him up. Then he said in a low and threatening voice, "Which courtyard is the sixth young master in?" "The north courtyard. The one in the north." Feeling the strength of the hand, as if it could break his neck at any time, the steward of the backyard answered with a pale face, "Lead the way." The middle-aged man casually pushed the steward to the back. A subordinate took the steward. The group of four then walked towards the courtyard where Yang Chendong was. All of this was seen by Yang Lu in the dark. However, because the young master had already instructed not to touch these people, he could only watch. However, the steward of the backyard who went soft was remembered. After this incident, this person would definitely not be able to stay in the Yang family's old residence. He actually dared to betray the sixth young master. Just based on this person would never be employed by the Yang family. Even with the personality of Tiger's mane and the other servants, it was hard to say if they could survive after leaving the Yang family. With someone leading the way, the four of them quickly arrived at the courtyard. However, this place was very quiet. It didn't look like someone lived here at all. At the same time, the middle-aged man also felt a faint murderous aura nearby, as if it could open its mouth and swallow him at any time. What is this place? Why is it so quiet? The middle-aged man's eyes were bright and full of expression as he looked around. However, he couldn't find any traces of other people. If it weren't for the fact that he carried out all sorts of missions all year round, he probably wouldn't even be able to feel a trace of murderous aura. After knowing that the other party was an embroidered uniform guard, the steward of the backyard didn't have a shred of integrity. He thought that the young master had committed a crime and was about to be captured. He thought that the Yang family was finished. Thus, he didn't hide anything and pointed to a room about 20 steps away. That is the study room of the sixth young master. Because the young master likes peace and quiet, servants like us are not allowed to come here. Trash. Seeing that the person in front of him had betrayed his master, the embroidered uniform guard who was holding him snorted angrily and casually threw him to the ground. The other person took large strides forward. From the looks of it, he wanted to scout ahead and see which room the sixth young master was in. Isn't it a pleasure to have friends from afar? However, this doesn't seem to be the way of a guest, does it? Could it be that you want to show off in front of this young master? A slightly immature but confident voice rang out. Following that, a young man in a green robe walked out of the study room, followed by a beautiful maid. He held a folding fan made of ivory in his hand, appearing rather graceful. The people who had appeared were naturally Yang Chendong and Xiao Yin. With Yang Chendong's keen senses, he naturally heard the approaching footsteps and knew that someone had arrived at the courtyard. However, he didn't immediately walk out. Instead, he pointed outside the window for Xiao Yin to see. Some troubles will appear even if we don't want to. You will slowly understand this young master's intentions. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.